In a world of endless war and political intrigue, he became the empire's greatest commander. But victory ended in heartbreak, the loss of the woman he loved. Given another chance, he vowed to protect her, even if it meant becoming her cold, wicked husband. The story opens with a man walking forward in heavy chains, his steps slow, his head lowered, and his future already decided. An official checks the time, then shouts for the noisy crowd to quiet down. Once silence falls, he announces the crime that sealed the man's fate. The late emperor had fallen deep into addiction, and because of that, narcotics were now considered an unforgivable sin in the empire. Anyone caught using or spreading them would be punished without mercy. And so, the sentence is carried out on the spot. The crowd cheers like they just watched a festival show instead of an execution, and among them stands one young woman who looks completely shaken. This is Aileen, our heroine. As she turns and hurries away, she overhears people whispering among themselves. They say it's a good thing the criminals were caught before the Grand Duke Erzet returned. According to them, if that man had handled it himself, the punishment would not have stopped with one person. Entire families would have been wiped out without question. That name alone carries weight. The Grand Duke is famous for ending a war by cutting down the king of another nation in a single move. Most commanders would keep enemies alive for talks. He did not bother. People call him unhinged behind closed doors, and now that the war is over, everyone knows his return is right around the corner. Hearing all this, Aileen's hands go numb. The herbs she was carrying slip from her grasp and scatter across the street. The sound draws attention, and suddenly people recognize her. She's the famous apothecary from the side alley, the one who always fixes their aches and fevers. They greet her warmly, thankful for the medicine that actually works. Aileen didn't bother to look. Her mind was elsewhere. She keeps telling herself that as long as her work helps people, it's worth it. Even if she has to use forbidden ingredients. Even if the risk is huge. Her research has a purpose, especially if it can help the Grand Duke and wounded soldiers. She just needs to finish it before anyone notices. And if the price is her own life, she's already accepted that. Later, Aileen returns to the tavern where she's staying. The place is strangely empty. She assumes everyone ran off to watch the execution, but the quiet feels wrong. Something sits heavy in her chest. She tells herself to calm down, that she's letting fear run wild, and heads to her room. The moment she opens the door, her heart nearly stops. Someone is already inside. Sitting there, calm and perfectly at ease, is the Grand Duke himself. Cesare. Aileen barely manages to speak. She asks when he came back, and he just smiles, like this is casual small talk. He asks if that's really all she has to say. Panicking, she bows deeply and congratulates him on winning the war. She explains that she planned to greet him properly, but assumed he was busy preparing for his celebration. Cesare responds in an odd way. He remarks that she's been doing something quite adorable while he was away. That comment alone makes her nervous. Then he drops the real issue. He knows exactly what she's been making. He straight up says it's about opium. When Aileen tries to explain, he cuts her off before she can finish. He tells her the excuse about painkiller research won't work, and reminds her that she knows the law. Anyone involved with narcotics faces death. And as Grand Duke, he has the authority to carry out executions immediately. That's it. Aileen collapses to her knees and bows so low her forehead nearly hits the floor. She rushes out her words, saying she only wanted to help him, to help the soldiers who came back broken and hurting. She truly believes her medicine could make a difference. Instead of getting angrier, Cesare does the opposite. He kneels down, gently cups her cheek, and tells her she doesn't need to be afraid. The tone shift is so sudden it feels unreal. Then, as if discussing the weather, he says he happens to be looking for a Grand Duchess. Before Aileen can process that sentence, he casually takes off her glasses, puts them on himself, and delivers the final blow. He proposes marriage. And that's how a medical genius ends up facing the most shocking proposal in the empire. Aileen freezes for a second, wondering if her ears betrayed her. But this is Cesare. A man like him does not joke about marriage. The problem is, she cannot imagine herself standing beside someone like him, not as his wife. So she gathers what courage she has left and turns him down. Instead of getting angry, the Grand Duke laughs it off and says it hurts his pride a little. According to him, She would rather lose her head to the guillotine than marry him, and he even reaches out to mess up her hair while saying it. Then, in the same calm tone, he reminds her of her options. If she refuses, she either faces execution or gets sold off to some awful pig man with money and no morals. That part confuses Eileen. Cesare only smiles and circles back to the real issue. He asks her again why she does not want to marry him. Lowering her head, Eileen finally explains herself. She says there is no way he could truly like her. For her, he only looks out for her because she is the daughter of his nanny. Someone he watched grow up. Someone he still sees as a child. She also brings up something important. What about his future heir? Instead of answering right away, Cesare leaned closer. Before Eileen can react, he reaches out, lifts her face, and kisses her. It is sudden, deep, and leaves no room for misunderstanding. By the time he pulls back, both of them are breathless. Looking straight into her eyes, he asks one simple question. Has she confirmed it now? That single moment leaves her completely shaken. Not long after, Eileen is escorted straight back to her residence by Rotan, one of the Grand Duke's knights. He asks if she is all right, but she looks like her soul is still somewhere else. Touching her lips without even realizing it, she admits that the Grand Duke proposed to her. Rotan does not look shocked at all. When she asks why he is so calm about it, he says it is obvious. She was about to be executed. With the Empire tightening its grip on narcotics, the Grand Duke had to act fast. He needed to save her life, and he also needed a wife. So he chose the most efficient solution. Simple math, really. Rotan even hands her some candy while explaining all this, like this is just another normal day. But Eileen cannot see it that way. In her mind, her family has always been tied to the Grand Duke because of her mother. If she were executed over illegal medicine, it would stain his name as well. That means the proposal might not be about her at all. If efficiency is the goal, then any woman could have taken her place. A marriage without feelings. Rotan listens, then asks a question that hits harder than expected. If she dislikes all of this so much, why did she get involved with the illegal medicine in the first place? Eileen answers without dodging it. She says she only wanted to help the Grand Duke. Ever since she was young, he has always been the one helping her. So she tried to give something back. A powerful painkiller, something that could actually matter in war, something that could ease suffering. When she asks how they even found out, Rotan says the surprising part is that she thought the Grand Duke would not notice. She had been buying opium far too carefully for it to go unseen. He even admits that at first, he wondered if she had become addicted or if someone had tricked her. Eileen quickly shuts that down. She may be reckless, but she is not foolish. In the end, Rotan insists that everything the Grand Duke is doing is for her sake, even if it weighs heavily on her shoulders. Eileen admits she needs time to think. Just thinking about her father alone already feels like a burden she would be dragging into the Grand Duke's life. She stops mid-thought when she notices Rotan suddenly spacing out. Calling his name snaps him back. Then, he tells her that when he mentioned he would visit her today, the other knights asked him to pass along their greetings. Seeing Aileen's bright reaction makes him smiles, though he adds that Diego even prepared a rabbit doll as a gift for her. While all of this is happening, Cesare remains behind in the tavern. He carefully examines Aileen's research, page by page. After putting it down, he mutters to himself that everything is proceeding as planned. All of it for the sake of someone he cherishes. The scene slips back in time, 11 years earlier. Young Eileen wanders through the Imperial Garden, tears streaming down her face as she calls out for her mother. The garden feels enormous. Every path looks the same, and she is certain she's lost. That's when a young prince spots her. It's Cesare. He approaches her and asks if she is Lily, the daughter of his nanny. Aileen pauses, sniffling, and explains that Lily is not her real name. It is just what her mother calls her. Before he can say anything else, she suddenly hugs him, clinging tightly as she admits she cannot find her mother. Between sobs, she explains that she was told to stay in one place, but got distracted by a strange flower. Cesare smiles and tells her not to worry. He says he will take her back, because he knows his nanny must be desperately searching for her by now. The memory fades, and Aileen lets out a quiet sigh. Looking back, she realizes how reckless that was. She was just relieved to find an adult, and threw herself into his arms, forgetting that he was only a young prince himself at the time. If anything, she probably should have run to the tall knight behind him instead. Rotan would have been the safer choice. That thought leads her to another memory. Her mother's voice, firm and unyielding, warning her again and again that no matter what happens, she must never tarnish Cesare's honor. The Elord family existed to serve him for life. Those words were carved into her heart, and even now Aileen has never forgotten them. To her, Cesare is the Grand Duke, the supreme commander of the Trajan Empire, the man who survived the fight for the throne and personally placed his only blood brother on it. He is noble, powerful, and far beyond her reach. And yet, somehow, she is expected to stand beside him as Grand Duchess. If her mother were still alive, Aileen knows she would never allow it. Someone like Aileen taking that position would feel like a stain on his name. That belief settles deep in her chest and hardens into resolve. That is why Aileen decides she must find another way to escape death without involving marriage. Staring out the window, she suddenly notices how late it has become. Her father still has not returned. But one day turns into several, and after an entire week passes with no sign of him, Aileen decides she cannot wait any longer. She disguises herself as a man and heads into the entertainment district, convinced her father must be gambling somewhere again. She remembers how excited he was when he heard about the Grand Duke's victory and the approval of the Arc de Triomphe. It had been a long time since he hit a big win, so he rushed out that day in high spirits. Thinking back, Aileen realizes that might have been the same day her father went to see the Grand Duke. If he really took gambling money from him, there would be a price to pay. At the very least, she needs to retrieve whatever money her father has left and return it. What she does not notice is the group of men trailing her from behind. They move quietly until one of them suddenly grabs her hat and yanks it off, exposing her face. Her disguise falls apart instantly. They laugh, saying she looked suspicious from the start, and even with her bangs hiding her features, they already knew she was a woman. The group closes in, step by step, making it clear they have bad intentions. Aileen freezes, fear taking over, and nearly stumbles backward. Just before she falls, someone grabs her and steadies her. A man steps forward and looks over the group with clear disgust. He comments that he was wondering where the foul smell was coming from, and it turns out all the trash gathered in one place. He asks if they really have nothing better to do than harass a woman. He looks more than ready to throw a punch when Aileen suddenly calls out his name. Diego was one of the Grand Duke's knights. The moment he heard her voice and realized who she was, sweat broke out across his face. Seeing the sudden shift, the group of men understood they'd chosen the wrong target and bolted without looking back, running as fast as they could to save themselves. After that close call, the two head into a nearby bar to cool down. Diego is still tense, asking what on earth she was doing wandering around such a dangerous place at that hour. He promises that once he catches those men from earlier, they will not be getting away with it. Aileen listens, then tilts her head and asks the obvious question. What is he doing in a place like this himself? Diego tries to brush it off by saying he just came for a drink, then hesitates and admits that he is technically on duty. Saying that out loud while sitting in a bar full of people serving drinks and putting on performances makes him pause. Even he realizes how ridiculous it sounds. He gets flustered, curses under his breath, and looks ready to lose his mind. Aileen teases him about his wording, which makes him apologize right away, saying it just slipped out. Her laugh finally breaks the tension. Once things settle, she asks the question she came here for. She wonders if Diego has seen her father. He has not come home for a week, and she had a feeling he might be somewhere in this alley. Instead of answering, Diego gently tries to redirect her. He suggests something warm to drink, like hot chocolate or milk with honey. That alone tells her everything. She knows he is hiding something. So, to prove a point, she grabs a beer and downs it in one go. Diego nearly panics, commenting that their young lady is all grown up now, drinking beer and everything. Aileen sets the mug down and looks him straight in the eye. She presses him again about her father. She admits she is not foolish and can tell he is avoiding the truth. If there is a reason she should not know, then she wants to hear it. Before Diego can answer, another voice steps in. Someone leans in close and whispers in her ear that Diego does not have the right to say it. The man adds that if Aileen wants to be angry, it should be directed at him instead. It is Cesare. After moving to a quieter place to talk, Cesare serves Aileen some cookies. She feels embarrassed, thinking about all the situations he keeps finding her in. As she tries to explain herself from earlier, she notices he is just watching her closely. His intense look makes her stop. Then he smiles and casually feeds her a cookie, reminding her to eat. For a second, she wonders if she imagined it. Lost in her thoughts, she does not notice him reaching out to brush away a crumb from her chin. Flustered, Aileen waves her hand and says she can handle it herself. Cesare only smiles and tells her she should not be so wary. He would never do anything to hurt her. A kiss, however, is another matter entirely. Gathering her courage, Aileen bows and asks if he truly plans to marry her. Cesare asks why she still sounds doubtful and whether she needs more proof. She nervously points out that before he left for the campaign, he never treated her this way. Of course, things are very different now. He looks at her gently and says that 7 years is more than enough time for things to change. That only confuses her more, since the war ended 3 years ago. His intense gaze makes her uncomfortable, and she asks him to stop looking at her like that. He responds playfully, asking how exactly she means. Aileen quickly circles back to what really worries her. She asks if there is truly no other way besides marriage. If not, she begs him to give her more time. She explains that when he proposed, she was not thinking straight. Then, she says that her research is different from existing painkillers, and if she can complete it, there might still be another way for her to avoid death. Cesare sweetly calls her name, and suddenly asks if she hated it when he kissed her. There is no way she did. He is the man she has secretly loved for years. But she cannot bring herself to say that out loud. The truth is, her research and her refusal both come from those feelings. She does not want to become a burden to him. Still, she cannot admit something like that. So she says she hated it. The Grand Duke is not convinced. He reminds her that he told her not to close her eyes when she lies. Turning her face away, she insists she is not lying, and says she is just overwhelmed because it was her first time. That only makes him smile more. He suggests that if that is the case, then they will just have to keep doing it until she gets used to it. Aileen instantly covers her lips, pointing out that she just ate cookies and drank beer. Despite her protests, he gently touches her face and places a kiss on her neck. It lingers long enough to make her feel strange, and when he moves closer, she finally pushes him away and tells him to stop. This time he does. Cesare takes her hand next, places a kiss on it, and calmly asks her to come to the imperial palace the next day. He wants her to attend his victory banquet and celebrate with him. At that point, Aileen has no strength left to refuse. Facing his pleading expression, she realizes saying no is simply not an option anymore. A few minutes later, Aileen is safely escorted back to her residence. Her carriage rolls away into the night, while Diego stands there scratching his head, watching it disappear. Out of all the days and all the places, he really had to run into her while on duty there of all times. He lets out a tired sigh and turns around. Diego heads into a place that looks nothing like the lively streets outside. Hidden behind the noise and lights is a grim, secret dungeon. The moment he steps inside, someone throws himself at his feet. It is Baron Elord. Aileen's father clings to him, begging desperately to be spared. He rambles about how his daughter must be searching for him by now, and demands to know why he has been locked up in such a terrible place. The man is a complete mess, fear written all over him. Before Diego can even respond, another presence makes itself known. The Grand Duke calls out to him, casually wiping blood from his face while smiling as if nothing is wrong. Then, in a strangely calm tone, he gives Diego a very specific warning. From now on, Aileen is never to be given alcohol, not even a drop. In fact, they should hide every last bottle from her. Diego does not even have time to react before Cesare grabs the Baron by the hair. Still smiling, the Grand Duke asks him if he has anything left to sell. The Baron panics and cries out, swearing that he never meant to sell Aileen. Diego can only stand there and watch as the Grand Duke punishes the Baron without hesitation. What unsettles him most is not the act itself, but the look on his master's face. Cesare seems almost pleased. That is when it hits Diego. Just as he suspected, the Grand Duke has changed. His thoughts drift back to 6 months ago, to the kingdom of Kalpen. Under the Grand Duke's command, the army marched straight into war. The enemy was completely overwhelmed. Bodies were scattered everywhere, even within the palace itself. By the end, the enemy king had no choice but to surrender. He admitted defeat and offered to bind his kingdom to the empire. That should have been the end of it. But Cesare said something strange. He mentioned that 7 years had passed and that he had finally returned. Then he laughed like a madman. The king froze in fear, and no matter how much he pleaded, it did not matter. Cesare swung his blade and ended it right there. Later, when others questioned him, asking why he did not keep the king alive to weigh his worth, his answer stunned everyone. He said he was going to marry Aileen. Rotun tried to reason with him, pointing out that marrying her would only place a heavy burden on her shoulders. Cesare did not deny it. He simply said there was no other choice. It was better than letting Aileen face the guillotine. That response sparked anger among the knights. They demanded to know who would dare lay a hand on their beloved young lady. Instead of answering, the Grand Duke only looked up at the setting sun and spoke quietly. Above all else, he said, he would not let it happen twice. Back in the present, Diego still does not fully understand what his master meant by that. But one thing is painfully clear now. The Grand Duke is willing to do anything, absolutely anything, for Aileen's sake. The next day, the capital was packed shoulder to shoulder as people gathered to welcome the Grand Duke's troop, the very army that dragged the empire to victory. Aileen had no choice but to squeeze herself into the crowd, getting nudged from every direction, all just to steal a single glimpse of the man she admired from afar. Once the parade rolled in, the cheers exploded. People shouted the Grand Duke's name like it was a spell that could bring good luck, praising him and the empire all at once. From a distance, Aileen could only admit one thing to herself. He really did shine. As the procession moved forward, a little girl reached out and handed Cesare a white lily. He accepted it gently, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Aileen figured that was her cue to leave. Then the cheering turned into confused murmurs. People began asking why the Grand Duke had stepped down, why he was walking instead. The knights immediately shifted, forming a path and saluting as if this were all part of the plan. When Aileen turned around, there he was, Cesare himself, standing right behind her, smiling and looking only at her. And then he said it. He told her that all of this belonged to her and offered the white lily. At that moment, the crowd went wild again, praising the Grand Duke even louder, but Aileen barely heard any of it. What she did notice were the knights. Their looks alone could stab holes through stone. Every single one of them seemed to be asking the same question without opening their mouths. Who was that woman, and why was she important enough to receive the lily? Maybe Aileen was overthinking it, and it was all in her head. Or maybe that really was how everyone saw her in that moment. No one could say for sure. But one thing was very clear. Somewhere nearby, a noble lady gripping a pair of binoculars was absolutely not enjoying the show. Later that day, a dress and jewelry arrived at Aileen's place. Everything carefully chosen, all sent by the Grand Duke himself for the victory celebration. Another woman bustled around the room, pacing back and forth, panicking over what to prepare first and how to turn Aileen into someone suitable for such an event. Aileen, however, stayed seated, lost in thought. Why would Cesare do something like that? He wasn't foolish. He had to know the capital would go into chaos over a single white lily handed in front of everyone. And yet, he still did it. That question pulled her back into an old memory. Her mother's voice echoed from her childhood, proudly saying that Cesare would become the light of the empire. As his former nanny, her mother had always spoken of him with pride and expectation. She often told Aileen that helping Cesare was her duty too. She was also the one who insisted Aileen wear eyeglasses, even when her eyesight was perfectly fine. She'd said it was better to keep those dreadful eyes hidden. Slowly, that kind of thinking stuck. Her mother's words wrapped around her, until Aileen convinced herself that hiding was safer, that covering her eyes and face was necessary. That habit followed her into the present. So when the time came to attend the celebration, Aileen ignored the jewelry and expensive dress. She chose a simple outfit she already owned, plain and unremarkable. After all, standing out had never been part of her plan. The banquet hall buzzed the same way the streets had earlier that day. Wine flowed, fans fluttered, and of course the main topic never changed. Everyone was talking about the parade. More specifically, Everyone wanted to know who the woman was that received the Grand Duke's flower. Some swore she had a beauty that couldn't be matched. Others were convinced she had to be from some powerful noble family. By the time the gossip made its rounds, people had already decided one thing for themselves. The future Grand Duchess must have been chosen. Meanwhile, the person at the center of all those rumors stood nearby, looking slightly out of place. Aileen listened without meaning to, and the more she heard, the more uncomfortable she became. A part of her wondered if coming here had been a mistake. But backing out wasn't an option. The Grand Duke himself had asked her to attend. So she settled on a plan that felt safe enough. Greet him politely, then disappear before anyone could look too closely. She had just started to move when someone suddenly bumped into her. Aileen quickly apologized and looked up, only to freeze when she realized she recognized the noble lady in front of her. Unfortunately, recognition went both ways. Almost at once, Aileen remembered something a patient had once mentioned in passing. The Emperor was engaged to a lady from the ducal house of Parbolini. The problem was that this lady had originally wanted to marry not the Emperor, but the Grand Duke. And standing right in front of Aileen now was Ornella von Parbolini herself, the Emperor's fiancée. The moment Ornella appeared, other nobles swarmed in as if summoned. Compliments flew left and right, praising her beauty and elegance. Many proudly declared that the title Lily of the Trayan Empire suited her perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. That title tugged at Aileen's memory. Cesare used to call her Lily when they were young. But standing there now, watching Ornella bask in admiration, Aileen couldn't help thinking the name fit someone like her far better. It didn't take long before the noble ladies noticed Aileen lingering awkwardly nearby. Curious eyes turned her way, followed by quiet questions about who she was. Ornella answered for them, her smile gentle and her tone polite, though it carried just enough sting. She introduced Aileen as the young lady who had received a flower from the Grand Duke during the parade. The whispers came back instantly. People exchanged looks and muttered that for someone rumored to be an unmatched beauty, reality didn't quite live up to the hype. Soon enough, they decided the story about a chosen Grand Duchess must have been nothing more than overblown gossip. Like any noble lady skilled in appearances, Ornella stepped in before things went too far. She scolded the others for being rude, saying their words were improper. Then she added that the Grand Duke was known for his compassion and couldn't ignore unfortunate situations. Aileen, she suggested, was simply someone under his sponsorship. Saying otherwise would only burden his generous nature. With that, the ladies were forced to apologize to Aileen. The words sounded proper enough, but Ornella's sideways glance told a different story. Just then, Rotan arrived like a lifeline. He approached Aileen and smoothly escorted her away, saying he'd been looking for her for some time and that everyone was waiting. Aileen didn't hesitate. She left with him without looking back, the noise fading behind her. The noble ladies could only stare in confusion. Watching one of the Grand Duke's most trusted knights personally escort Aileen made them rethink everything, because suddenly, calling it mere sponsorship didn't sound quite right anymore. As the two of them walked side by side, Rotan thanked Aileen for coming, saying the Grand Duke would be pleased to know she attended. He even checked if her trip had been comfortable. Then he admitted, a little awkwardly, that he should have escorted her himself, but his schedule had exploded at the worst possible time. Aileen brushed it off shyly and said there was nothing to worry about since the Grand Duke had arranged everything for her. She arrived just fine. Then she mentioned that Cesare had even sent someone to help her dress, but she sent the woman back because it felt like too much. Thinking about it now, she couldn't help wondering if that was a mistake. Standing there in a simple dress, she felt like she stood out even more, and not in a good way. Before Rotan could respond, Diego jumped in like he'd been waiting for his cue. He dramatically declared that it wasn't true at all. According to him, if she had dressed up properly, things would have been far worse. With a sigh, he added that every man in the capital would have swarmed around her without mercy. That scenario sounded like a disaster waiting to happen. Aileen ignored his exaggeration and instead asked about the knights she was familiar with, like Michel and Senyon. She had expected to see them too. Diego explained that they'd be late and might not even make it. Seeing the disappointment on her face, he quickly tried to recover. He suggested having tea together sometime soon and proudly announced that he'd bought her a rabbit doll. Apparently, it looked just like her. He conveniently forgot the fact that she was no longer a child. Not long after, other knights noticed Aileen and started gathering around her. The atmosphere warmed up quickly, and before she realized it, her dance card was almost full. Only the first dance slot remained empty, which felt a little strange, though she didn't have time to think about it. That was when Rotan announced that they had arrived at the greenhouse. He explained that new plants from the east had arrived recently, and that some of them might be useful for her research. That immediately caught Aileen's interest. Still, she asked what Rotan planned to do. He hesitated, then told her to focus on looking around and said there wouldn't be any issues when she headed back. The answer didn't quite make sense to her, but curiosity won out in the end. Once inside, Aileen quickly realized just how much the greenhouse had changed. Even so, being there stirred up familiar feelings. Memories surfaced without warning. When she was young, thanks to Cesare, she spent nearly every day in that place. It was where she could breathe and forget everything else. Then a familiar voice cut through her thoughts, saying that it was still a place that brought her peace. She turned and saw Cesare standing there, smiling brightly, saying that he had been waiting for her all along. As usual, one look at Cesare's handsome face was enough to make Aileen's thoughts shut down for a brief moment. And before she knew it, she realized she had been staring for far too long. Panicking, she scrambled to pull herself together and offered a proper greeting, congratulating him on his victory. Her clumsy rush only made things worse in the cutest way possible. Cesare smiled, clearly amused, and calmly returned her greeting, thanking her in the same polite tone. That only made her blush harder. Nervously, Aileen asked if she had made a mistake somewhere, admitting that she was still bad with etiquette and formalities. Cesare brushed that aside and praised her instead, saying she had done well. Then, he reached for her dance card and casually added his name to it. That was when it finally clicked for Aileen why her first dance slot had been left empty. Seeing her confused expression, Cesare asked what was wrong. Aileen admitted she never thought he would be the one to ask her to dance. She wasn't good at it, and had never even taken proper lessons. That earned her another smile. Cesare asked if she had forgotten who taught her very first steps. The memory hit instantly. Young Aileen, clumsy and unsure, stepping on her own feet again and again, just to convince herself it wasn't a dream. Cesare had been busy that day too, yet he still took the time to teach her how to dance. It should have been a happy memory. Instead, it twisted into something painful. When her mother found out, she scolded her harshly, furious that Aileen had dared to waste his time on something so trivial. She demanded to know if Aileen had forgotten her place. The flashback ended with young Aileen trembling, bowing her head over and over, apologizing through fear. Even now, the memory was so vivid that she found herself mumbling an apology meant for her mother. That worried Cesare. He gently lifted her face, asking what she was thinking so deeply about. Aileen avoided his gaze and changed the subject instead, urging him to hurry back since the ballroom was waiting for him. Cesare commented that he could spare a moment to look around the greenhouse first. He mentioned hearing about a flowering tree from the east, and said he wanted to see it with her since it had been a while. The excuse was weak, and Aileen knew it. He had never cared about plants. As they walked, Aileen thanked him for the lily earlier, as well as the dress and jewelry he had sent. She quickly apologized for not wearing them, explaining that she only planned to pay her respects and never imagined she would end up dancing at the ball. Her mood shifted instantly when she spotted the camellia tree. The moment she saw it, all her gloom vanished. As a herbalist, she excitedly explained everything she knew about it, how she had read about it and always wanted to see one in person. She talked about how its petals were used as a styptic, and how the flower didn't shed petals one by one but fell whole, which made people compare it to a severed head. Because of that, it was seen as ominous in the East, a flower associated with beheading. Cesare leaned closer and asked if that was really the kind of flower she liked. She immediately denied it, saying it was just interesting. What shocked her next was seeing Cesare suddenly reach out and try to pluck the plant. Aileen stopped him right away, saying it would be better to talk first since the seedling was fragile. He let go at once and muttered an apology, smiling as if nothing strange had happened moments ago. He said he hadn't been himself lately. When Aileen asked if something was troubling him, He admitted that maybe there was. Then he added that he had nearly watched her lose her head to the guillotine. Even so, Aileen knew something was off. He had never been this impulsive before. Thinking back, even his proposal felt rushed. She couldn't help wondering what had happened to him during those 3 years. As if answering her thoughts, Cesare suddenly declared that their wedding would be held in a month. He said sooner would be better, but they needed at least some time to prepare. Aileen protested, reminding him that she still wasn't fully convinced and that she wanted to find another way. She said he had already shown her more kindness than she deserved, and that marriage didn't have to be the only way to save her life. That was when Cesare pulled her close to his chest without warning. He had noticed the assassins closing in around them. He whispered for her to close her eyes. The scene shifted back to the ballroom. Michelle was asking around, worried, wondering where Aileen had gone. She nervously asked if Aileen's dance card was already full. Diego teased her, saying she was right and that she should have moved faster. Rotan then asked about Señon, and Michelle replied that he wouldn't be able to finish his task that day. Their conversation was cut short when a loud commotion broke out at the entrance. What everyone saw next froze the room. Cesare stood there, covered in blood, with a trembling Aileen beside him. He addressed the nobles calmly, saying that while the night was meant to celebrate his victory, assassination attempts had once again made an appearance. The method hadn't changed, and to him, it felt lazy and insincere. With a cold smile, he told them he understood their intentions very well and that he would repay them in due time. He suggested they look forward to it. The ballroom fell into a silence that no music could fix. Another memory quietly takes over, pulling Aileen back to a time. In that flashback, a much younger Aileen is sitting across from Cesare in the greenhouse, tea and snacks laid out between them. She asks him, in her small and curious voice, if he really likes plants that much. When he answers yes, she follows up by asking if he has actually read the entire plant encyclopedia he once gave her. A servant pours her tea, and Aileen excitedly talks about how fascinated she is with the book, sharing little facts she remembered. Just as she lifts the cup to drink, Cesare suddenly stops her and takes the teacup from her hands. Without hesitation, he pushes the cup toward the servant and orders him to drink it instead. The mood shifts in seconds. The servant drops to his knees, confessing his crime and begging to be spared just once. Cesare doesn't raise his voice. He only coldly points out that he told him to drink the tea, not to beg for forgiveness. With a flick of his finger, a maid forces the servant to drink it. Moments later, the man collapses, poisoned. Cesare tries to brush it off as if it's nothing, casually telling Aileen that the man won't be drinking tea anymore. But then he notices her. Young Aileen is crying, frozen in fear, unable to process what she just saw. That's when Cesare's calm mask cracks. Back then, the young prince had no idea how to comfort her. He didn't know what to say, or how to make it better. Even now, Aileen understands what happened that day. Someone had tried to kill Cesare first. By all accounts, it was self-defense, even if the method was brutal. Still, knowing that doesn't erase how terrifying it was to witness. She knows how often he must face things like that, threats and betrayal woven into his daily life. And yet, instead of standing beside him, all she did was sit there, scared. Her thoughts drift to the gift she had prepared for him, the pocket watch she planned to give him when he returned. She never got the chance. Their reunion had been swallowed whole by his sudden marriage proposal, leaving no room for anything else. Out of nowhere, a voice calls from outside, asking if the Baron is inside. When Aileen opens the door, she politely says her father isn't home and asks who the man is. When he confirms her name, his smile twists into something unpleasant. He lifts her bangs without permission, studying her eyes and face far too closely. He comments that they're just as mysterious as the Baron described. Then he explains that Baron Elord promised to sell him something and even took an advance payment. He waited and waited, but the item never arrived. As his grip tightens on her, Aileen trembles and asks what her father promised to sell. The answer hits her like ice. The man says it was the Baron's last remaining possession, his daughter, Aileen herself. He reveals that the Baron sold her to him as a bride, and that everything for the wedding had already been prepared. And since she seems unaware, he gives her 3 days before he comes back. Before leaving, he tosses the contract onto the floor, and advises her to say her goodbyes in advance. Once they leave the country, there would be no reason to ever return. He walks away, leaving Aileen standing there, stunned and unable to move. That's when Cesare's words finally make sense. He had asked her why she refused his proposal. She remembers him saying it would either be the guillotine or being sold off to some disgusting man, which means he knew, from the very beginning. He knew her father had already sold her. And still, he offered marriage as her way out. This time, Aileen doesn't hesitate. She rushes straight to the Grand Duke's palace. When she arrives, she's greeted by Sonyo, Cesare's butler, who gently complains about how she treated him earlier while he was serving her drinks and snacks. Aileen quickly apologizes, admitting she was too flustered to notice herself. Sonyo waves it off, explaining that he wasn't asking for an apology. He just wants her to treat him the same way she always has, comfortably and without distance. When Aileen asks about Cesare, the butler hesitates before admitting that there's a good chance she won't be able to see him today. He apologizes since she came all this way. Aileen says it's fine. She knows how busy the Grand Duke must be. Still, she can't help noticing the troubled look on Sonyo's face. It makes her wonder if the man received some imperial order. Just as that thought settles in, Sonyo suddenly remembers something and offers her cake he bought from a new shop, then politely excuses himself. Left alone, Aileen drifts toward the large window. That's when the weight of everything finally hits her. She scolds herself for rushing there without thinking. From the start, Cesare has never been someone she could meet freely. Now she wonders if her constant rejection of his proposal made him grow distant. She refused without knowing the full situation, and from his point of view, she must have looked painfully foolish. Her thoughts spiral fast. What happens to her now? Being sold off to someone she's never met, dragged into a marriage she never chose, then leaving this land forever without ever hearing from the man she loves again. Her overthinking ends the moment she hears her name. Cesare is standing on the other side of the window, looking at her with concern, asking what's wrong. With a trembling voice, Aileen says she wants to give him something. It's not anything grand, just a small gift she didn't manage to give him at the banquet. When he opens the box, Cesare softly comments that this is what it originally looked like. Aileen panics, thinking the design displeased him. She's about to explain herself when he stops her. It's not that at all. He smiles widely, openly pleased, clearly cherishing the gift in his hands. That smile breaks her. Tears spill out before she can stop them. She hurriedly wipes her face, apologizing between sobs, which only leaves Cesare confused. She tries to explain that she's crying, then corrects herself and says it's just everything. Holding her cheek, Cesare admits that seeing her cry makes it impossible for him to stay angry. He confesses that he was planning to be much harsher with her. When she asks why, he explains bluntly. They were planning to sell her, someone who hadn't even debuted in society yet, to some old man in a foreign land. And while that was happening, all she could think about was avoiding marriage with him. How could he not be angry? He asks her directly if she'd rather marry that man instead of him. Aileen shakes her head without hesitation. So he asks her what he should do. When she says she doesn't know, he counters right away. How could she not know? The answer is simple. She just has to marry him. Leaning closer, he asks if she still truly dislikes the idea. Aileen doesn't answer right away. Instead, the question that's been circling her mind all day rises to the surface. Why didn't he tell her when he already knew everything? But even now, she realizes this is something she has to understand on her own. The answer he chose has long been set, unchanging. It feels like invisible strings are binding her tightly. But if those strings are the only light pulling her away from despair, then she accepts them. Meeting his gaze, Aileen finally speaks and tells him she will marry him. Then she quickly adds her condition. She asks him to reopen the lab for her. Otherwise, she'll just become a grand duchess who brings him nothing but trouble. She promises that once her research is complete, she'll never study dangerous medicine again. Cesare doesn't answer with words. Instead, he kisses her. It's long and deep, like something he's been holding back for far too long. When he finally pulls away, he calmly tells her that the lab doors will open after their wedding. Later that night, Eileen and Cesare walk side by side through a narrow back alley. Just one look at them is enough to make people stop and stare. They look completely out of place. Eileen insists she can meet her father on her own, but Cesare calmly shuts that down. From now on, he says, she goes everywhere with her husband. That word alone nearly makes her trip. She shyly corrects him, saying she's not his wife yet, and then she points out the obvious problem. Did they really come all the way here dressed like this? To make things worse, Eileen isn't wearing her glasses, which makes her painfully self-conscious. She keeps her face lowered, clearly uncomfortable. Cesare leans in and quietly tells her to lift her head. Eileen admits she's just not used to showing her bare face. Pulling her closer, he tells her no, saying she'll bump into something if she keeps walking like that. That only makes her panic more. She asks if it's really fine for him to walk around openly when he's so famous. What if someone recognizes him? He jokes that even if they do, people will just think he came out for a drink with his lover, which of course is exactly the problem she's trying to point out. Despite the awkward teasing, they soon arrive at the place where her father is staying. The moment Eileen looks inside, she realizes it's nothing like the bar she visited there before. Suddenly, the crowd erupts in cheers as a beautiful woman steps onto the stage. She moves gracefully, completely owning the room. Eileen instantly recognizes her. This is the same woman who once came to her lab asking for medicine, saying she wanted to die beautifully without pain. Back then, the woman looked hollow, like someone barely holding on. Now she's radiant. The crowd calls her name loudly. Marlena. Marlena's eyes sweep over the audience and land on Eileen. Then she notices the man holding Eileen by the waist. Her smile falters, and something sharp flashes in her gaze. Soon, she begins to sing. The song is all about worthless men, about women being fools for believing sweet lies and sugar-coated words. The lyrics are clearly aimed, just not at the right person. The Grand Duke doesn't look offended in the slightest. If anything, he seems amused. He even asks Eileen if she knows the singer. She quickly denies it, far too nervously. Deciding it's better to leave, Eileen suggests they find her father instead. Marlena watches them go, her expression far from pleased. A short while later, they reach the room they were looking for. Cesare asks if she's really prepared to meet her father in a place like this. Eileen answers firmly. She needs to see it herself. She needs to confront him about trying to sell her. When she opens the door, laughter and noise spill out. Inside, people are drinking and fooling around as if nothing matters. And there, right in the middle of it all, is her father. Drunk, careless, surrounded by women, doing things no daughter should ever have to witness. Cesare steps in at once, covering her eyes. He tells her it's all right and gently instructs her to breathe slowly. A painful memory surfaces from her childhood. Her mother once asked her if she could smell another woman's scent on her father. Like someone slowly losing her sanity, her mother spoke about how the Baron shared his body with other women, but wouldn't even touch his own wife. That's why, in her mother's world, it was only her and Eileen. Just the two of them against everything else. The memory snaps apart when Eileen hears Cesare calling her name. He tells her again that everything is fine, that she just needs to breathe. Wrapped in his arms, the strength she was holding on to finally breaks, and she starts to cry. Soon after, a servant splashes water onto the Baron to wake him. The women scatter at once. When the Baron looks up and sees the Grand Duke, the color drains from his face. Cesare coldly remarks that he never imagined the man would sell his own daughter and still carry on like this. The Baron tries to protest, but the moment he realizes who witnessed everything, the Grand Duke cuts him off, warning him to mind his behavior. Lifting Eileen into his arms, Cesare adds that he's been rather impulsive lately, and that if the Baron makes another mistake and loses his throat by accident, this truly will be his last chance. With that, he walks out, carrying Eileen away from the filth of it all. Once they're alone, Cesare gently sets her down on a chair and tells her she can open her eyes now. It's over. Seeing how shaken she still is, all he can do is pull her into his arms again, holding her tightly until the trembling finally fades. Eileen eventually settles down, until sleep finally takes over. By the time her breathing evens out, she's already curled up on the Grand Duke's lap. That's when Roten quietly reports that Marlena is asking to see him. Cesare doesn't even look up. He calmly says now is not a good time. Rotan, however, doesn't let things end there. He points out that what Cesare did earlier was cruel. The Grand Duke already knew the man who bought Aileen would show up, and he could have stopped him before Aileen ever saw his face. Cesare countered that he had actually restrained himself from being even harsher, because under the original plan, the man shouldn't have met her at all. That way, Aileen would have been able to make up her mind, but seeing her face softened his heart. Rotan then asks why, if that's the case, Cesare didn't stop her from seeing her father too. Cesare doesn't dodge this one. He says it was because Aileen wanted to see him. Rotan doesn't reply, but he understands. Letting her see the truth wasn't kindness. It was a clean cut. Aileen has always been weak when it comes to blood ties, and Cesare knows it. Showing her that scene was the fastest way to break whatever attachment she still had left. Then he asks what the Grand Duke plans to do about Marlena. Since the lab was closed, she seems to have been searching for Aileen nonstop, and she doesn't look like someone who would back down easily. Surprisingly, Cesare agrees to let her meet Aileen, but he also adds that in his view, Marlena is a useful woman in many ways. Then he gives his final order for the night. He tells Rotan to print the wedding announcement in tomorrow morning's paper. That way, Aileen won't have a chance to change her mind. The next morning, Aileen wakes up with that familiar sinking feeling in her chest. The kind that shows up right after she realizes she cried, clung to someone, and fell asleep like a kid who needed babysitting. Truly embarrassing. She's still trying to sort through the mess in her head when the peace shatters. Noise explodes outside her house, her name being shouted like it's some kind of headline. Confused, Aileen moves to open the door, only to grow even more bewildered by the sight before her. Newspaper people stacked at the gates, all talking at once, firing off questions about her sudden marriage to Grand Duke Urze. Someone even shouts something insane about her threatening his life if he didn't marry her. Absolute madness. The only thing stopping them from flooding in is the solid wall of knights guarding the place. Before the situation can spiral further, a warning shot fires into the air. A voice follows, loud and polite in a way that still sounds dangerous, asking them to quiet down because they're startling their mistress. It's Michelle, and she looks way too excited about this whole thing. Proudly announces Aileen's status as the future Grand Duchess. Shockingly, it works. The crowd settles down. Michelle beams and tells Aileen not to worry, that she'll take care of everything, and that Aileen should just stay inside. She even hands her chocolate, like this is all no big deal, and Aileen just needs a snack. Of course it doesn't end there. Another woman demands to be let in, loudly insisting she's Aileen's acquaintance, and that the Grand Duke himself approved her visit. That name alone does the trick. Marlena is escorted inside. Once they're seated, Aileen immediately asks how Marlena got there and whether something's wrong. Marlena doesn't sugarcoat it. She pulls out the newspaper and shows her the marriage announcement printed in bold. Seeing Aileen's obvious confusion, Marlena presses her to be honest. She promises that if Aileen was forced into this, she'll help her escape, no matter what it takes. That's when the story quietly slips back to the first day they met. Back then, Marlena had walked into Aileen's lab asking for a medicine that would let her die beautifully, without pain. Aileen, instead of recoiling, promised to make something as painless as possible, but said it would take time. A month, to be exact. Marlena would need to visit every 3 days. Aileen claimed proper checkups were necessary. She also gently told Marlena to see a specialist, mentioning how abortion after effects could be severe, and that she needed to stay healthy if she wanted to look beautiful. Even then, Marlena knew the truth. No poison needed a whole month. But she still came back. There were no treatments, no real medicine, just endless small talk and casual conversations. Tea and desserts that felt far too refined for a poor apothecary's lab. At first, Marlena found it annoying, tedious. Aileen rambled, told boring stories, and wasted time. Somewhere along the way, those pointless visits became something Marlena waited for. Without realizing it, she stopped wanting to die. She wanted to live again. And now, seeing Aileen trapped in what looks like another impossible situation, Marlena is ready to repay that debt, because Aileen gave her life back. So when Aileen finally admits that becoming the Grand Duchess was her own choice, Marlena is stunned. Aileen explains it plainly. She committed a crime. Cesare covered it up, cleared her debts, and needed a grand duchess. Marriage was the solution. To Marlena, that explanation sounds painfully naive. She bluntly asks whether Aileen truly believes this was her decision alone. Everything about it feels shaped, guided, cornered into place. Someone as kind and innocent as Aileen wouldn't see it, but Marlena does. And to her, the Grand Duke is a man without a human heart. While that conversation simmers, Cesare plays the piano with calm precision. The moment is peaceful, until his brother, Emperor Leon, strolls in and compliments the performance. He teases that Cesare's playing has gained depth, probably because he's in love. Later, the brothers sit together for tea. Leon remarks that despite all the talk, Cesare chose Aileen in the end, even though many claimed she'd only make him unhappy. Cesare casually responds that they're probably right, but after 7 years of thinking alone, he changed his mind. That number makes Leon pause. 7 years? Before he can ask further, Cesare simply keeps sipping his tea like nothing happened. Leon switches topics and tells him to bring Aileen to the palace soon. Formal greetings should happen before the wedding. Cesare agrees, adding that he'll also be dealing with the Senate Speaker. The Emperor warns him that the man is dangerous, slippery, not easy to corner. So what's his plan? Cesare breaks a cookie in half and smiles. He says an incident is coming soon, then corrects himself. It'll be his son-in-law causing it. He crushes the cookie between his fingers, saying they'll use that mess as bait. Leon laughs, joking that Cesare talks like someone who's seen the future. But when he looks closer and sees how serious his brother is, the joke dies in his throat. Cesare admits the truth. He keeps thinking about who threw stones at Aileen, who cut her corpse apart, who took it away. As he looks at the pocket watch she gave him, he says that's exactly why the wedding needs to happen fast. Otherwise, he's convinced he'll end up killing half the empire with his own hands. He says it with a smile. And that's what makes it terrifying. As the sun dips low, Marlena finally decides to leave. Aileen sees her off, waving cheerfully as if nothing heavy had been said between them at all. Marlena glances back, her thoughts lingering on their earlier conversation. She had warned Aileen plainly that the Grand Duke isn't a man with a human heart. She's seen how he destroys his enemies, cold, exact, leaving no loose ends. A man who calculates like a machine, more demon than human. Marlena insists that even if he looks gentle in front of Aileen, his true nature is cruel to the bone. Aileen doesn't deny it. She admits that she already knows that side of him. She watched him long enough to understand how dangerous he can be. But if she doesn't become the Grand Duchess, she'll be forced to go abroad for reasons she didn't share with her friend. And once that happens, she'll never see him again. That's the part she can't accept. With an embarrassed smile, Aileen admits something even she finds a little ridiculous. She really likes him a lot. And at that point, even Marlena has no idea what kind of situation this truly is. After Marlena leaves, Aileen glances down at the newspaper again. The wedding announcement still feels unreal. Without thinking, she touches her lips, her mind replaying his kisses. The realization hits her a second later, and she quickly scolds herself for spacing out like that. Her brief shyness doesn't last. A knight approaches and informs her that the Grand Duke is calling for her immediately. Orders were given for her to be brought to him at once. Aileen studies the man more closely. The uniform looks familiar, but the face doesn't. Something feels off. Cesare had always warned her when she was young. When he orders someone brought to him, he never sends a stranger. At the very least, he sends someone she recognizes. Because of that, she knows better than to follow just anyone. Keeping calm, Aileen says she needs to change clothes first and tries to excuse herself. She barely takes a step before the man grabs her wrist. Before she can react, he pulls out a handkerchief laced with an obvious sleeping drug. Seconds later, the only thing left behind on the ground is her glasses. Being kidnapped isn't new to her. The memory drags her straight back to her childhood, back when she was small, blindfolded, shaking in fear, calling out for her mother or Cesare in a place she didn't know. She remembers how terrified she was. And she remembers how he came for her. When the blindfold was removed that day, Cesare's worried face was the first thing she saw. He tried to calm her, held her steady, told her everything was fine. Through her sobs, She had asked how he was there when she knew he was supposed to be at war. He never answered properly. He just smiled and told her they would go home for now. That memory ends as Aileen slowly regains consciousness. She opens her eyes and sees a man standing in front of her. For a split second, relief floods in, and she calls out, thinking it's Cesare. But the illusion breaks instantly. The man isn't him. He's another noble, holding a dagger and looking down at her with a cold, terrifying expression. News of Aileen's disappearance reaches the Grand Duke almost immediately. Worse still, every guard assigned to her home, and all the emergency personnel, are gone as well, as if they'd vanished into thin air. The conclusion is obvious and ugly. There's a traitor somewhere high up in the military, so an investigation starts right away. The knights panic instantly, throwing out plans and rescue ideas all at once. Everyone is tense, loud, and desperate to move fast. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke stands there holding Aileen's glasses, calm to the point of being unsettling. For a man whose future wife was just kidnapped, he looks far too composed. Instead of rushing out randomly, he announces that he's heading to the chairman of the Senate. Senyon objects right away, pointing out that the chairman is part of the military and seems like an unlikely suspect. Cesare doesn't argue. He simply says it's not the chairman they're after, but the chairman's son-in-law. The reason is simple enough. He's the one distributing the drugs. In fact, all the drugs flooding Fiore Street trace back to him. Diego nervously asks how Cesare even knows that, and whether he investigated it himself. Cesare doesn't bother answering. He only says they should hurry, because Aileen will be waiting. The smile on his face at that moment feels completely wrong for the situation. The scene cuts back to Aileen, who's surrounded by a deranged nobleman and his two lackeys. She tells them she doesn't even know what they want, but still warns them that the Grand Duke is a cold man. She tries to downplay her own worth, saying she's just an ordinary woman. If she dies, Cesare could simply replace her without hesitation. In short, she's a useless hostage. The nobleman laughs and admits that was what he thought at first too, but not anymore. He explains that Cesare once deserted the battlefield as a prince, and the reason for that was her. Hearing that, everything clicks for Aileen. Even her childhood kidnapping suddenly makes sense. He really did come for her back then. The man slams a dagger on the floor near her face and says, this isn't about gaining something. He just wants to ruin Cesare. Gesturing for his men to hold Aileen's arms, he sneers that his own life is about to fall apart because of the Grand Duke, so it's only fair if he loses something precious too. All Aileen can think about is a promise from long ago. Cesare once told her that if she's ever captured and things turn dangerous, she shouldn't fight back. She should stay still and wait. He promised he would come and save her. Clinging to that promise like her last lifeline, Aileen forces herself to believe he'll come. Instead of crying, she glares straight at her kidnapper. The man is startled, then amused, lifting her chin and mocking what a lady like her could possibly do. Her answer is simple. She spits in his face and screams for him to get his filthy hands off her. That's enough to push him over the edge. Enraged, he grabs her face harder, and in doing so, fully reveals it. All three men freeze for a moment, visibly shaken by her beauty. The nobleman curses under his breath, admitting that now he understands why the Grand Duke is so possessive. His excitement only grows as he leans closer, whispering about having a good time together. Aileen does everything she can to stay calm. She keeps praying that Cesare will keep his promise, even as the man's hand slowly moves toward her chest. Every second stretches unbearably long. Then the door opens. The Grand Duke finally arrives. He calmly praises Aileen for being a good girl, for staying still, and for not even crying this time. The moment she sees him, her body starts trembling, and all she can say is that she wants to go home. Cesare steps forward, pulls out his gun, and smiles. He tells them that won't be happening. Tonight, she'll be sleeping at his estate. What follows is swift and brutal. When it's over, the three kidnappers lie broken and bloodied on the floor. Cesare carries Aileen out of the filthy place without looking back. As they leave, Diego asks what should be done with the nobleman and whether he should be finished off. Cesare says no. He wants the man left alive. After all, he has other plans for him. As soon as they arrive at the Grand Duke's estate, Senyon reports that the Senate chairman has completely lost his composure. The old man is desperately begging, saying they can send his son-in-law straight to the guillotine as long as his daughter is spared. He's willing to sacrifice everything except that. Cesare listens calmly and says that was always the plan. Then he adds, almost casually, that the chairman only has one eye left anyway. If that eye were to be taken, it would be rather difficult for him to keep sitting in the chairman's seat while blind. Then, a soft knock interrupts the room. Aileen is standing at the door. Seonyeon vanishes instantly, leaving the couple alone without a second of hesitation. Aileen's attention immediately goes to Cesare's bandaged hand. She asks where he cut it with a sword earlier, her worry obvious when she notices how deep the wound looks. Cesare doesn't answer directly. Instead, he gently takes her hand and says that she must have waited again. That confuses her, but he continues, saying she waited because he promised to protect her. He says she must have been scared, that she cries easily, and that she probably cried a lot this time too. Then he pulls her into a hug and apologizes. Aileen asks what he means. From her point of view, he always comes for her. He always keeps his promises. Even today, he saved her just like before. Cesare insists there was one time he couldn't. When he looks into her eyes, there's something heavy there, something she can't quite understand. As usual, he doesn't stay on the topic for long. He pulls her closer and cheerfully announces that it's time to sleep, just like that. Before she knows it, Aileen is lying in bed with Cesare's arm under her head. She nervously asks if his arm hurts. He hugs her tighter and says it doesn't hurt at all. He adds that she must have been terrified today, so she should sleep now. In a soft voice, he tells her that her husband will stay with her until she falls asleep. The problem is, sleep refuses to come. When he notices she's still awake, he asks if she's uncomfortable. She shakes her head and admits that being in his arms actually makes her feel calm. Cesare teases her, reminding her that she once said she hated this. She denies it, then blushes and admits that what she hated back then was the kissing. He laughs at her, clearly entertained. Aileen realizes that while she's still nervous around him, his touch never feels unpleasant. If anything, she finds herself wanting to stay right where she is. Then he kisses her and jokes that it's because she was looking at him like she wanted one. Her reaction says enough. As she looks at him, Aileen thinks that if there were a line separating good and evil, Cesare would be standing boldly on the darker side. And yet, he's also the only one who can protect her from it. That contradiction is exactly why he's her only salvation. With her heart pounding, Aileen gathers a bit of courage and admits that she's fine with kissing now. That single sentence is all it takes. Cesare pulls her closer and murmurs that she shouldn't regret saying that. The kiss that follows is nothing like before. It steals her breath, makes her head spin, and leaves her feeling like she's being completely swallowed up by him. This isn't some awkward first kiss anymore. This one is slow, heavy, and way too intense for her poor nerves. When his lips trail down to her neck, Aileen feels her face heat up even more, like her whole body forgot how to function. But something very solid presses close, and Aileen freezes. Her eyes widen as the realization hits, loud and clear, with zero mercy. It's like a long, hard sword. Whatever innocent expectations she had just got crushed in 1 second flat. Cesare notices her reaction and, of course, finds it amusing. He smiles and calmly pulls the blanket away, showing no mercy as he teases her even further. She panics and hurriedly asks him to wait. Unfortunately for her, she keeps addressing him formally even now, and Cesare absolutely refuses to let that slide. He keeps teasing her, dragging it out, clearly enjoying how flustered she is, until she finally says his name. By then, she's breathless, red from head to toe, and very aware of how close he is. He looks down at her and casually tells her that next time, she should use her mouth. Whatever he means by that, I'm too overwhelmed to even question it. And yes, he absolutely knows what he's implying. The next morning comes quietly. Aileen is still asleep, breathing evenly. Cesare watches her face in silence, his expression heavy, as if he's holding back too many memories at once. He remembers a different time. She had once begged him not to go to the battlefield, scared he wouldn't come back alive. Even the butler tried to convince Cesare to at least see her before leaving, just once. But Cesare didn't bend. He believed that seeing her would only make things harder, and that nothing would change anyway. In his mind, He told himself he would comfort her properly when he returned. But when he did return, Aileen was already gone. That memory still burns. Standing before her lifeless body, Cesare noticed something missing. Something that should never have been taken. That single detail sent his anger straight through the roof. Even now, just thinking about it makes his blood boil. He forces himself to calm down. This life is different. In this world, Aileen is alive, breathing. This is his first, and also his last chance. He gently places a kiss on her forehead and wishes her a sweet dream, even though he knows he may never wake up from his own nightmare. A few days later, justice arrives fast and brutal. The chairman's son-in-law, the man who kidnapped Aileen, is beheaded on the guillotine. As always, a huge crowd gathers to watch. People cheer, laugh, and celebrate as if it's a holiday. Diego finds it disturbing and wonders why executions turn into public events like this. Michelle explains the superstition behind it. People believe that taking a piece of an executed criminal brings good luck. Apparently, the bodies of nobles and young maidens are especially popular, which makes the whole thing even worse. The Grand Duke comments that this kind of scene isn't good for his mental health. If he wants to stay sane, he says he should hurry up and get married instead. Rotan stays quiet the entire time. While everyone talks about the execution, he's thinking about the Emperor's recent secret summons. The Emperor had said he was worried because his brother had been acting strangely lately. The fact that Cesare casually admitted he might kill the people of the Empire if pushed hard enough didn't help ease those concerns. The Emperor knows Cesare isn't reckless. He never acts without reason, which means something must be going on behind the scenes. That was why he secretly gave Rotan an order, making sure the Grand Duke would never find out. That night at Aileen's house, the knights showed up one by one, clearly happy just to be there. They even thanked her for the invitation. Diego proudly handed her a stuffed bunny, reminding her it was the one he had mentioned before. Rotan immediately argued that books would have been the better choice, while Sinan jumped in, insisting that a fountain pen was far more useful, one he had already prepared. Michelle, not missing a beat, declared that snacks beat everything else, and that this discussion was already pointless. The room quickly turned noisy as they argued over gifts like children. Aileen, overwhelmed but smiling, gently suggested they eat first before the debate got any louder. That was when the guests realized something shocking. Every single dish on the table had been made by Aileen herself. Michelle nearly lost it on the spot, half joking and half emotional, wondering when the small, fragile Aileen she remembered had grown up enough to cook an entire feast. Flustered, Aileen explained that everyone had gone through so much trouble because of her, and she simply wanted to do something in return for once. With that, the mood softened. Everyone sat down to eat, gently telling her not to blame herself for everything and to enjoy the moment with them. While eating, Diego casually mentioned that the Baron had gone out again and wondered if he still hadn't come to his senses. The words slipped out too easily, and the table fell quiet. Realizing what he had done, Diego quickly apologized to Aileen, feeling awful for bringing up her father. Aileen reassured him right away, saying it was fine, and that she understood why people felt that way. She knew how frustrating it must be to watch her remain tied to someone who kept disappointing everyone. One of the knights carefully asked how she was feeling, since it hadn't been long since that terrible incident. They worried she might be forcing herself to act normal. Aileen gave a small smile and said she was fine. She explained that the Grand Duke had arrived so quickly that day and saved her before things could get worse. Though remembering that moment still made her embarrassed in a very specific way, she insisted she was truly okay now. Just then, Rotan called her name in a serious tone that instantly changed the atmosphere. He informed her that His Majesty the Emperor, without informing the Grand Duke beforehand, wished to meet her later at the royal palace. The next day, Rotan escorted Aileen through the long, echoing corridors of the palace. Glancing at her, he gently asked if she was nervous. She admitted that it had been a long time since she last met His Majesty. Now that she had decided to marry the Grand Duke, she knew this meeting would happen eventually, but it felt far too soon. Rotan reassured her, reminding her that she had spent plenty of time with both brothers in the past, so there was no reason to feel uneasy. As soon as she entered, a familiar yet commanding voice called her name. Leon remarked that it had been a while since they last met. Aileen bowed properly, showing flawless etiquette. Leon approached her, noting that she had truly grown and even mastered court manners perfectly. He thanked her for coming right away and said there were a few things he wanted to ask. Then his gaze sharpened, and he asked whether she held resentment toward the Tryon Empire. Without much warmth, he followed it up by questioning if she had asked Cesare to wipe out nearly half of the Empire's people. The question hit her like a slap. Aileen froze, completely at a loss, unable to understand how such an idea even existed. When she tried to respond, her voice shook despite her effort to stay calm. As they sat down for tea, Leon eventually spoke again, saying he did not believe she was capable of something like that. The Aileen he knew would never harbor such intentions. Hearing this only made her thoughts spiral. Had the Grand Duke really said something so extreme? She wanted to believe he hadn't, but given how he had been lately, the idea didn't feel impossible either. She started to explain herself carefully, but stopped mid-sentence when she noticed Leon's expression. His face had turned cold in an instant, making her flinch. For a moment, she wondered if there was something else he wanted to say but couldn't bring himself to. Then his expression softened slightly, and he gave a faint smile. He remarked that 4 years had passed since that day. Aileen nodded quietly. Looking past her, Leon asked if she still resented him for what happened back then. The question pulled her straight into an old, painful memory. Years ago, she had knelt before him, desperately begging to see Cesare just once. Leon had coldly replied that Cesare himself refused to see her, and there was nothing he could do about it. With a trembling voice, she had asked why he would send his own brother into a war everyone feared. How could he allow him to walk toward something so dangerous? Leon had snapped back, calling her insolent. It was his brother's own choice to go to war and to reject her presence. It was not her place to interfere, and he had made that very clear. Back in the present, Leon's voice finally lost its edge. He reminded Aileen that he had tried to stop Cesare before, more than once. He had even risked his own life to place his brother on the throne, only for him to turn around and say he was heading straight back into danger. Leon asked her plainly if she truly thought he had been happy hearing that. The answer was obvious, even without words. After a short pause, Leon admitted that maybe Cesare had been trying to protect something after all. Maybe it was the Empire itself, or maybe it was the place where she lived. Then, as if remembering something important a bit too late, Leon added that he wished to congratulate her on her marriage. The timing was awkward, but the sentiment was there. Aileen thanked him with practiced calm, doing her best not to let the heavy conversation show on her face. Leon then revealed why he had really called her in. Lately, his brother had been acting strangely, different in ways even Leon could not ignore. He suspected there was a reason behind it, and wondered if Aileen might know what that reason was. Before she could answer, the door burst open without warning. The Grand Duke stormed in, voice sharp and mood even sharper, demanding to know why Aileen had been wandering alone while leaving her husband behind. Once all three were seated, Leon muttered that Cesare had found them sooner than expected, and jokingly asked if Rotan was still alive. Cesare replied that it depended entirely on Leon's next answer. That was enough to make Leon uneasy, though he forced a weak smile and quickly asked him not to take it out on Rotan, since the man had only followed his orders. Cesare did not soften. He asked whether there had really been a reason to summon Aileen without his knowledge. While saying this, he calmly added sugar to a teacup and slid it toward Aileen, reminding her to drink before it cooled. The small gesture said more than words ever could. The way the two looked at each other made Leon suddenly feel like he had accidentally walked into a scene he was not meant to witness. Third wheel was an understatement. That was when it finally hit him. He had been wrong. Leon apologized to Aileen, saying that if he had startled her in any way, it had never been his intention. All he wanted was for everyone to remain on good terms. Then, he suggested that he and Cesare talk privately, noting that it had been far too long since they last had a proper conversation. He instructed a servant to guide Aileen to his private garden, adding that he had heard she liked plants and would probably enjoy it. At the mention of a garden, her face brightened immediately. Before she left, the Grand Duke gently brushed her hair aside and told her to explore for a while. With a smile, he reminded her not to wander off again without her husband. The scene alone was enough to make anyone watching nearby feel painfully single. As Aileen walked away, she reflected on how different Leon became when it came to his brother. Despite everything, the two were still very close. The strange part was how Leon seemed slightly distant when it came to her. Her thoughts were cut short by a faint smell of smoke. Looking around, she noticed a servant kneeling and acting as an ashtray for a lady standing nearby. That lady was Ornella. The moment Ornella noticed Aileen, her sharp gaze locked on her. Aileen tried to greet her politely, but ended up coughing lightly from the lingering smoke. Ornella turned to the servant and asked who she was, acting as though she had never seen Aileen before in her life. The servant introduced her. Ornella repeated the name with a bored tone, saying she was terrible with names anyway. Her eyes swept over Aileen, and she added that her face was not exactly memorable. She then dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her heel, as if making a point. With a fake smile, Ornella offered her congratulations on the marriage. The words sounded polite, but the expression behind them told a very different story. Aileen returned a nervous but proper thank you. Of course, Aileen understood the hostility. Ornella had once planned to marry the Grand Duke herself instead of becoming the Emperor's fiancée, so this situation was never going to sit well with her. Ornella casually remarked that Aileen must be very busy these days. When Aileen asked what she meant, Ornella pretended to be concerned. She mentioned rumors about Aileen's family finances not being in great shape, and wondered aloud how she had managed to prepare a dowry under such circumstances. She continued talking without waiting for a reply, pointing out that a bride was usually expected to bring one. With Aileen's mother gone and no noble ladies to guide her, she said it must have been hard to learn such basic things. The words stung. Aileen felt heat rush to her face as embarrassment set in. She realized how foolish she had been to assume that once the marriage was arranged, everything else would sort itself out. She had promised herself she would never become a burden, yet here she was, feeling like one already. Noticing Aileen's shaken expression, Ornella softened her voice and offered what she called an alternative. She said she happened to be looking for a new handmaiden and suggested that Aileen could work for her until she saved enough for the dowry. Before Aileen could respond, a man's voice cut in from behind, telling her that he had instructed her to wait in the garden. Both ladies turned as the Grand Duke approached, his attention immediately settling on Aileen. He greeted Ornella politely, and in return, her face lit up with exaggerated delight, like a lovesick puppy spotting its master. Watching the exchange, Aileen finally understood. Ornella had wanted to marry the Grand Duke simply because she was in love with him. With that realization, Ornella's hostility suddenly made perfect sense. Ornella then paused and said she felt cold, apologizing and mentioning that her dress was thin for the weather. Her eyes flicked toward Cesare as he began removing his coat. She praised his thoughtfulness with a smile, only for it to falter 2 seconds later when Cesare draped the coat over his future wife's shoulders instead. Meanwhile, Aileen flushed at the gesture. He calmly told her to wear it because it was cold. She awkwardly tried to refuse, saying it was not that cold and that she was fine. Behind them, Ornella bit her lip, staring at Aileen with open irritation, no longer bothering to hide how she felt. As the two of them walked away together, Cesare was the one who spoke first. He brought up how she had asked him to reopen the research laboratory before the wedding. Aileen answered right away, not even pretending otherwise. Yes, she really wanted that. He reminded her that they had already talked about this before, as if the matter should have been settled. Aileen admitted she was rushing things, which immediately made him curious. When he asked what the hurry was, she paused before finally explaining. She needed access to the laboratory to prepare her dowry. She had completely forgotten that a wedding involved 2 people, not just feelings and promises. Hearing this, Cesare immediately guessed that Ornella had planted the idea in her head. Aileen admitted that the dowry was part of the problem, but it was not the whole story. What truly weighed on her mind were the patients waiting for her. There were people who depended on her medicine, people who trusted her work. The new treatment she had been developing was finally showing progress, and stopping now felt wrong. Taking everything into account, she believed opening the laboratory as soon as possible was the right choice. Cesare looked at her with a faint smile, the kind that made it hard to tell whether he was amused or impressed. He teased her by asking how large of a dowry she was planning to bring. Aileen, taking the question far too seriously, said she would need time to calculate it. She planned to look at the average amount and work from there, her voice full of determination. That was when he gently cut in and asked what she would do if she came up short. Would she sell dangerous medicine to make up the difference? Her reaction was immediate. insisting she would never do such a thing and that she would swear her life on it if needed. The Grand Duke softly called her name, leaned in, and pressed a quick kiss to her lips. The sudden closeness startled her enough that she slipped back into addressing him far too formally again. He told her that he had already received what she was offering, and then showed her the pocket watch she had given him. With a playful tone, he asked if she planned to keep addressing him like that forever, because at this rate, he might as well change his name entirely. Aileen, feeling cornered and a little helpless, finally called him by name. She admitted that she did not really know how much a proper dowry usually cost, but she was sure that her gift was far too small to count as one. At that, his gaze drifted somewhere far away. He recalled once owning a watch just like it, given to him by a man facing his end. Broken and useless, the watch had still been deeply treasured. Yet in the end, he was forced to use it to return, and it shattered in his own hands. He looked back at her after finishing the story. Now she had given him the same watch. He asked her quietly if something like that was not worth more than 1,000 pieces of gold. Aileen could only stare at him. Cesare then told her that because of that gift, he no longer needed any dowry at all. He had already received far more than enough from her, and in that moment, it was clear he truly meant it. The scene first drifted to Ornella, who was very busy enjoying herself. She lounged comfortably among several young men, letting smoke trail lazily through the air, as if the world existed only to entertain her. On the surface, she looked relaxed and spoiled rotten. But her thoughts kept circling back to her recent encounter with the Grand Duke. In that memory, Cesare had casually asked Aileen whether she had explored the garden. When Aileen admitted she had not, he asked why she was still standing around. His gaze then slid toward Ornella, sharp and cold, and without raising his voice, he ordered his servants to escort the lady outside, commenting that she seemed to have lost her way. The dismissal had been swift, polite, and devastating. Ornella scoffed inwardly. She now thought the Grand Duke had been far too gentle. Compared to his calm rejection, her own anger suddenly felt small. With a lazy flick of her fingers, she summoned the man beside her. He immediately obeyed, lifting his drink and slowly pouring it along her neck, while 2 others knelt to kiss her feet. It was indulgent, excessive, and exactly the kind of attention she usually enjoyed. And yet, even surrounded by devotion, her mind wandered back to Cesare's cold eyes and the calm expression on Aileen's face. Under her breath, she whispered Aileen's name, her tone anything but friendly. Back to Aileen, who sat quietly with her diary in hand. As she flipped through the pages, memories came rushing back. She remembered her younger self shyly calling out to Cesare and boldly confessing that she wanted to marry him, offering a small bouquet she had carefully prepared. Back then, Cesare had looked far gentler, smiling as he told her she needed to grow a little more first. When she asked how much more, he pointed to a nearby plant and said she needed to be at least that tall. Little Aileen, however, gasped at a towering tree. That tree could grow up to 15 meters, which meant her marriage would be very, very delayed. Even so, Cesare had only laughed softly and patted her head, and she had smiled despite herself. Turning the pages, Aileen found notes written in her childish handwriting. One entry reasoned that if she waited until she was as tall as the tree, it meant Cesare truly planned to marry her. Another declared that becoming a spring bride was impossible, yet another excitedly stated that she had received a promise of marriage, and that the wedding ring should definitely have a very large gem. Closing the diary, Aileen smiled to herself. She had been adorable back then, and Cesare had been endlessly kind. Her thoughts then shifted to Leon's words about how his brother seemed different these days. Cesare himself had admitted that while the war was said to last 3 years, it had felt like 7 to him, and that he had not been in his right mind for a long time. Then there were his recent words, saying that he had already received too much from her. Putting all of it together, Aileen could not deny it anymore. Cesare had changed, and because of that, she wished he would rely on her, even just a little. But to do that, she knew she first had to become someone dependable. With quiet determination, she decided to start with today's schedule. Just then, a familiar voice called her name. Diego waved cheerfully and announced that today was finally the day, asking if she was ready to go. Aileen felt a small wave of nervousness pass through her, mixed with fear she did not quite want to admit. She clenched her fist and softly steadied herself. Starting today, She must do her best. Naturally, the story jumped straight to a dress shop. The attendants welcomed the future Grand Duchess with sparkling eyes, loudly declaring that they would find the finest wedding dress possible. But as they observed Aileen more closely, the mood shifted. One whispered nervously about her bangs, saying they would completely overshadow any dress. Another pointed at her glasses and suggested that if all else failed, a veil might help. Someone proposed that they should at least tie her hair up first. That was when Diego firmly told them to leave her appearance exactly as it was. The attendants protested, arguing that they needed to style her hair to match the gown. After all, the Grand Duke himself had requested the finest dress, yet they were not allowed to touch even a single strand of her hair. Diego replied that the Grand Duke had never asked for the finest hairstyle. At that moment, Aileen gently stopped him. She removed her glasses, gathered her hair, and tied it up herself. With a shy voice, she asked if that would be acceptable. The effect was instant. Without the glasses and heavy bangs, Aileen's beauty stood out so clearly that the room fell silent. The attendants stared for a moment, before breaking into frantic whispers. They immediately shifted their plans, guiding her toward lighter, flowing designs that would move gracefully with the wind. Orders for a hairdresser were sent without delay. As they continued fitting her, one attendant softly admitted that Aileen looked absolutely beautiful, the kind of bride people would remember throughout the empire. Another encouraged her to look in the mirror. But instead of feeling happy, Aileen suddenly realized something. She had forgotten the real reason she had stopped looking at her reflection in the first place. When did Aileen stop recognizing her own face? The answer rushed in without warning, dragged out by a memory she had buried deep. It came with her mother's sharp voice, heavy with anger and disgust, aimed straight at Aileen's eyes. Words that tore her down piece by piece, calling them unpleasant and something that should never be seen. Worse, her mother even dragged Cesare into it, questioning what he must feel whenever he looked at her, as if Aileen's existence alone was an offense. Then came that terrifying image of the cold shine of scissors lifted into the air, close enough to make a child believe that staying still was the only way to survive. The memory alone made her whole body stiffen. Aileen forced herself to breathe. Keeping her voice steady, she said she liked the dress and asked if she could change back into her own clothes now. It was polite, calm, and very carefully controlled. One of the attendants gently told her it would be a shame not to tidy her hair just a little since she was already dressed. Nothing drastic, just enough to frame her face better. The moment Aileen saw the scissors, her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She began to shake as panic wrapped around her like a vice. She couldn't breathe properly. That was when Diego stepped in. He moved quickly but spoke gently, grounding her with steady words. He reminded her that she was safe, that nothing bad was happening, and that she only needed to breathe slowly. A few minutes later, once everything had calmed down, Aileen was seated comfortably with a cup of tea and some light snacks placed neatly in front of her. She thanked Diego in a small voice, but he shook his head right away. He said that if she had been startled, it was probably because of him. Reactions like hers were something he had seen countless times on the battlefield, so it did not shock him at all. What truly surprised him was learning that she was afraid of scissors. However, Aileen stayed quiet. Sensing the mood getting a little too heavy, Diego suddenly put on a small cat-shaped mask. The timing was so unexpected that Aileen froze for a second before asking where it even came from. He answered casually that there were always ways to work around things. That simple reply drew out a soft laugh from her. Once she relaxed a little, Diego gently asked if something had happened in the past. After hesitating, Aileen admitted that she had nearly had her eye injured by scissors once. The confession visibly startled him. But she quickly added what sounded like a carefully patched-up story about playing alone often as a child. Then, trying to shift attention away from herself, she remarked that someone as strong as Diego probably was not afraid of anything. He corrected that idea right away. Soldiers, he said, were still people, and fear was very much a part of them too. Seeing her confusion, Diego explained further. They trained endlessly for war, planned strategies, and prepared for every outcome. Still, battles were lost. Comrades fell. That feeling of repeated defeat was terrifying in a way that never fully went away. During those moments, he had turned to piercings and tattoos. At the time, he told himself it helped him endure, but looking back, he admitted it was closer to self-harm than healing. Tears welled up in Aileen's eyes, catching him completely off guard. He quickly reassured her that he was fine now and that it was all in the past. When she asked how he managed to get better, his answer was simple. He realized he was not alone. Whenever things became unbearable, he ran straight to Rotan, Signon, or Michelle and complained endlessly about when they were finally going to win. Together, they found ways forward. He even laughed as he recalled joking with the Grand Duke that if they lost again he would quit being a knight altogether. After that, somehow, the Grand Duke always led them to victory. Because of him, Diego truly changed. As Aileen listened, something warm and steady settled in her chest. She was not alone either. In her thoughts, she imagined Cesare calling her name, telling her to come closer. She quietly shared her own resolve. She wanted to change too. Even if she could not become stronger all at once, she did not want to feel ashamed standing beside the Grand Duke. She wanted to face her fears slowly, one step at a time. With her newfound determination, the two eventually made their way to the Grand Duke's estate. Diego wasted no time, immediately trying to steer Aileen toward another meeting with Cesare. She panicked, pleading with him to stop. He was busy, she insisted, and asking him to stay by her side just because of her fear of scissors was far too much. But Diego did not budge. He insisted that there was no better method. When someone wanted to overcome fear, having the person closest to them nearby worked best. Aileen continued protesting anyway, growing more flustered by the second. In her nervousness, she even suggested that maybe she should just take a sleeping pill and sleep through it instead. She mentioned that there was a fairly strong one in the laboratory. That was the wrong thing to say. Diego spun around immediately, alarm written all over his face, clearly trying to signal her to stop talking. Too late. A voice came from behind them, calm but sharp, asking what sleeping pill she was talking about. Cesare stood there, his eyes focused on Aileen. Later on, once they were inside the room, Aileen lowered her head and apologized. She said she was sorry for causing trouble over something so silly. He brushed it off right away. To him, there was nothing strange about it at all. Then, with that relaxed tone of his, he casually asked if she wanted him to hold her hand. It sounded like a joke, but not really. Aileen tried to act composed and shook her head, saying that just having him beside her was already enough. That answer lasted about 2 seconds before her cheeks heated up. In a much quieter voice, she admitted that it might actually be nicer if he did hold her hand after all. Cesare did not waste the opportunity. He smiled, reached out, and gently took her hand in his like it was the most natural thing in the world. Without even noticing it, Aileen ended up staring at his face while holding on tightly, as if letting go would make everything fall apart again. That was when the butler entered the room with a warm, grandfatherly smile. He lightly joked that his old hands were not so terrible, and suggested tidying her hair instead. Cesare immediately called Aileen's name and told her to keep her eyes closed. He promised he would stay right beside her the entire time. That alone was enough for her to nod and slowly remove her glasses. As Sonia began trimming her bangs, she focused on one thing only: the steady warmth of Cesare's hand holding hers. She clung to it the whole time, grounding herself in that simple contact. After a while, Sonia stepped back and announced that he was done. He handed her a mirror with visible pride, saying that he was quite satisfied with his work. Aileen looked down at the mirror. Even though her vision still refused to show her face clearly, she nodded and said she liked it, thanking him sincerely. Of course, Cesare noticed something was off. Aileen politely added that he must be very busy, and thanked him again for sparing his time. She admitted it felt strange to have Sonia personally cutting her hair. That was when Cesare lifted the mirror slightly and asked her if she could see something else instead. She hesitated. He then told her gently that if the mirror showed her anything she did not want to see, she should tell him. There was no pressure in his voice, only concern. Her hands began to shake as she finally admitted the truth. When she looked into a mirror, she could not truly see her own face. Everything turned dark, distorted, like her mind refused to let the image exist. It was not pain or damage to her eyes. She had studied enough to know that. Whatever it was, it lived somewhere deeper, in her thoughts or her heart. The Grand Duke reached out and softly held her face, his touch careful and warm. With her voice trembling, Aileen asked if he hated looking at her now. With her hair like this, without her glasses, with eyes she believed to be unpleasant, He stopped her immediately and asked if he had ever once said she was unpleasant. She shook her head. So he leaned closer and told her that those words had come from her mother, not from him. And her mother, he reminded her, was not her entire world. That sentence landed heavily, sinking straight into her chest. Cesare then added in a quiet voice that maybe he should have gone back there sooner and handled things properly from the beginning. The meaning behind it was serious enough to confuse her. When Aileen asked what he meant, he brushed it aside, gently patting her head and telling her it was nothing she needed to worry about. After a moment, he suggested that she should head home for now. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added that she could also stay the night again if she wanted. That single suggestion hit Aileen out of nowhere. She stared at him in silence as her mind scrambled to catch up. Obviously, she chose to head back home. Cesare personally escorting her was already decided before she could protest properly. She was secretly happy about it, though also embarrassed that she kept taking up his time. She even asked if he really planned to drive her all the way back himself. Cesare answered by questioning whether she truly intended to walk home alone at such a late hour. When she admitted she had planned to, he shut that idea down smoothly. As her husband, he said, it was only right that he made sure she got home safely. End of discussion. Not long after, they stood side by side in front of the orange tree in her yard. The Grand Duke casually commented that it looked the same as before. Aileen immediately disagreed, pointing out how much it had grown. After all, it had been almost 10 years since he gave it to her. Calling it the same felt a little unfair to the tree. That made him ask if she even remembered why he had given it to her in the first place. A memory rushed back. A younger Aileen following a stranger without thinking, Cesare scolding her sharply, and her tearful excuse about an amazing medicine that tasted like oranges. He had patted her head back then while she cried and apologized non-stop. Remembering it now made her want to sink into the ground. She said there was no way she could ever forget something that embarrassing. Cesare just laughed it off and casually mentioned that he was hungry. She thanked him for walking her home and turned to go inside, thinking that was the end of it. But it was not. He called her name again and reminded her that he was still hungry, then leaned toward her without warning. That alone was enough to throw her completely off balance. Somehow they ended up inside her house. At first, Aileen panicked and begged him to stop, or at least let her handle the cooking. Seeing him with a knife made her nervous, her palms damp with worry. That fear faded fast when she noticed how skilled he actually was. Every slice was neat and precise, like he had done this many times before. She joked that it would be nice if he could help portion research materials too. He smiled faintly, kept working, and soon served the food. As Aileen looked at him, a quiet thought crossed her mind. Long ago, she had dreamed of simple days like this. But now that she had agreed to become the Grand Duchess, she knew those dreams did not quite fit anymore. The Grand Duke's place in the world was far from ordinary. Noticing her expression, he called her back to the present and told her to try the sandwich. She thanked him and took a bite. Halfway through chewing, she realized he was staring at her. When she asked if something was on her face, he denied it. He simply said he had wanted to look into her eyes properly for a long time. He also added that if he had known her reason for hiding them, he would have taken it off much earlier. The sandwich slipped straight out of her hands. Completely flustered, she asked what he meant by taking something off. Cesare teased her lightly before clarifying that he meant her glasses. Nothing else. Still red in the face, Aileen said that if he liked it, she would go without them from now on. Quietly, she thought she might look a little less gloomy that way. Trying to escape the awkward moment, she shoved a sandwich and told him to try it since it was really good. Without warning, Cesare took her hand and licked her fingers clean, catching her completely off guard, then calmly said that it truly was delicious. Her face burned as she stood there, wondering when she had started reacting like this, and whether she was seriously becoming a pervert. Afterward, she showed him her room and shyly brought out a stuffed rabbit, asking if he wanted to see it. She explained that Diego had given it to her. Cesare barely reacted. Instead, his eyes slowly scanned the room. Watching him inspect everything made her uneasy. She wondered why he suddenly wanted a tour of the house. To fill the silence, she admitted that she thought she was too old for dolls. Still, The more she looked at it, the cuter it seemed. She wondered aloud if Diego still saw her as a child, since he brought her a doll every time he returned from a trip. The Grand Duke leaned toward a nearby pot and remarked that everything looked exactly the same. Nothing had changed. Even the room still carried her scent, as if time had paused. Confused, Aileen tried to point out that the last time he had seen her room, she had been very young, so of course things must have changed. Before she could finish, he commented that she owned far too many books and pulled one from the shelf. Her heart nearly stopped. It was her diary. She rushed toward him in panic, tripped over the plushie, grabbed his arm, and blurted out the first excuse she could think of. She asked if he wanted to brush his teeth together. Moments later, she was standing beside him at the sink, brushing her teeth and questioning every life choice that led her there. Cesare commented that it felt surprisingly fresh, making her flinch. She hurriedly explained that she had made the toothpaste herself using herbs and store-bought powder, and that the ingredients were good quality. He then asked if she had made the soap too. She brightened immediately, confirmed it, and invited him to try it. As he washed his hands carefully, she watched with proud eyes, like a proud mama to her child. When she noticed the sun setting, she awkwardly apologized, saying that talking about soap at a moment like this felt strange. She suggested that maybe he should be heading back soon. Instead, Cesare tossed the towel aside and suddenly pulled her closer. Leaning down, he whispered that from now on, no matter who asked, she should never allow anyone else into her bedroom. Blushing hard, Aileen replied that no one but him had ever entered anyway, so there was nothing to worry about. His expression shifted as he asked if she did not fear what he might do to her. It sounded like a test. Instead of shrinking back, she smiled gently and said the Grand Duke would never harm her. Even if something bad happened, it would only be because she had done something wrong. That answer made him lift her chin and say that this too could count as punishment before kissing her. Aileen protested, saying this was not what she meant, and she did not make a mistake at all, but he did not stop. Overwhelmed, she wrapped her arms around his neck, completely caught in the moment. When he finally pulled back, he called her name and told her firmly not to speak so lightly about death again. As his body moved downward, an unfamiliar, wild sensation jolted Aileen. Maybe this was what he meant by punishment and eating at the same time. Meanwhile, Senyon rushed in, fully expecting to finally see Aileen that day. Instead, the room greeted him with only Diego, who wasted no time teasing him. He said Senyon was always late when it came to Aileen, and that she had left ages ago. The disappointment hit instantly. Senyon said it was such a shame. He had heard that Aileen had fixed her hair and even removed her glasses. She had worn them for so long, even though her eyesight was never actually that bad to begin with. That comment wiped the grin off Diego's face. This time, he answered seriously. Everyone had assumed Aileen hid her face to prevent another kidnapping, like the one she suffered as a child. But that was not the truth at all. What really happened was far worse. Diego revealed that the late Baroness, Aileen's mother, had been far more unstable than any of them had imagined. The conversation drifted back 6 years, inside the Imperial Palace. Back then, Diego had openly complained that they could not let things continue like this. Everyone already knew the Baron was useless and a complete trash, so that was nothing new. The real problem was the Baroness, whose behavior grew more erratic as time passed. Michelle had sighed in agreement. Whether it was jealousy or something else, the more Cesare showed favor toward Aileen, the more twisted her mother became. Even Senyon had admitted that he never believed either of Aileen's parents were fit to raise her. At one point, he had even suggested letting her be adopted by another noble family. Cesare had shut that idea down immediately. He explained that if they dragged Aileen away by force, she would break. She was not the kind of child who could abandon her family, no matter how bad things were. Instead, he instructed Rotan to look for a university with dormitories. Aileen had a clear talent for botany, and he wanted her somewhere she could properly study and grow. But things did not go as planned. After 2 years, Aileen returned home without graduating. The Baron had completely ruined the family finances. With her grades, she could have easily become a professor even back then. The waste of potential left a bitter taste for everyone involved. Diego clenched his jaw as he admitted his frustration. They all knew Aileen had a hard childhood, but he never imagined it involved physical harm. Bowing his head, He said she had been so small back then, barely more than a handful. After hearing all of this, Senyon hesitated before asking what had really been bothering him. He wondered aloud if Diego had any idea what was going through the Grand Duke's mind lately. Before Diego could answer, a familiar voice cut in. The Grand Duke himself told them that if they had something to say, they should say it directly. He sat down with a lit cigar in hand and asked what it was about him that made them so curious. The knight answered nervously, saying he did not understand why the Grand Duke kept pushing Aileen into the public eye. He brought up the day Cesare gave her a white lily during the procession. Then there was the rushed wedding announcement, even allowing her to cross paths with Ornella. To Senyon, it felt like the Grand Duke was deliberately exposing Aileen over and over again. Cesare did not deny it. He said many things had changed, and that he was simply arranging the board to match those changes. This was the fastest and most accurate way to identify people who wished to harm Aileen. Senyon argued that if that was the goal, there had to be a safer and gentler method, even if it took longer. The Grand Duke scoffed at the idea of having another option. Then he coldly asked whether the knight meant he should shackle Aileen, lock her away deep within the residence, and ensure she never met another soul. Or perhaps he should round up anyone who displeased him and have them all punished. Honestly, the Grand Duke found the second option far more tempting. With a vicious smile, he said that if he truly wished, he wouldn't even need elaborate measures. He could storm into the streets and deal with them himself, those who had once thrown stones at Aileen, those who had turned her suffering into spectacle. Memories from a past life surfaced, things the knights could never know, stories of people turning her tragedy into cruel gossip, putting her lifeless head on display for entertainment, and dishonoring her even after death. And yet, he was forced to let such people continue drawing breath. The more Cesare spoke, the more Diego and Senyon grew confused and deeply unsettled. Still, Cesare went on. If he acted on those impulses, Aileen would be destroyed in another way. She wanted him to be a noble and just Grand Duke. Because of her, he chose restraint and this path. In the end, he looked straight at them and asked him a simple question. Even if this road brought her some unhappiness, was it not still the better choice for her? Fast forward to their wedding day. When word spread that the ceremony would be held at the mansion, people were skeptical until they saw it with their own eyes. It was breathtaking. Naturally, the whispers quickly shifted to the bride. Aileen came from a small and unfamiliar barony, and that alone was enough to spark curiosity. One noble lady leaned in, eager to find out what she really looked like. Another claimed she heard from her uncle that the bride was supposedly the ugliest woman alive, which only made others wonder why the Grand Duke would choose her. That was when Ornella interrupted them, clearly annoyed. She scolded them for speaking so loudly, reminding them that spreading rumors at a wedding showed a complete lack of manners. With perfect composure, she explained that Aileen was connected to Cesare because her mother had once served as his nanny. According to Ornella, while Aileen's appearance or background might invite curiosity, her character never did. She praised Aileen as hardworking and steadfast despite her humble circumstances, even adding that Aileen had once asked for the chance to work as her maid. Then came her performance of concern once again. Since they would soon be part of the same imperial family, Ornella claimed she had only tried to stop Aileen from lowering herself. She cautioned them about false rumors, even as she quietly planted a few of her own. By the time she was done, the crowd was convinced the marriage was built on loyalty and pity, not love. While all that was happening, Aileen had just finished preparing. Rotan politely informed her that it was almost time to head down. She hesitated and asked if Ornella had already arrived. When he confirmed it, her nerves spiked immediately. In her mind, she pictured Ornella offering fake congratulations in a dazzling dress, while guests laughed behind their hands, wondering if the bride had been switched at the last second. Her confidence was so low that she could not even imagine how stunned people had been earlier when they saw her. Still, remembering Cesare's words gave her just enough strength to take a step forward. Soon, Aileen began her walk. Knights, musicians, and guests alike froze, mouths slightly open as they stared at the veiled bride. She kept her head lowered, enduring the weight of all those eyes on her, even as the place fell into an uneasy silence. Then the Grand Duke called her. At that, she finally looked up and met his gaze. Memories instantly rushed through her mind. He was the man who had protected her when she was small, who watched her grow, who gave her warmth and care she never truly received at home. The world she once thought was forever out of reach now stood right in front of her, not as a dream, but as her groom. From that moment on, there was nothing left for her to fear. When Cesare lifted her veil, he was stunned. Aileen's face was radiant, tears of joy spilling freely as she smiled at him. As the wedding ceremony continued, the vows were exchanged with the priest's guidance. The Grand Duke swore to give his eternal, unchanging love, to offer his absolute trust, to become a winged lion guarding their new home, and to wield his sword for his lady, without hesitation. Whether he meant the literal sword or something else entirely was unclear, but the priest could only cough awkwardly at the vow. As for Aileen, she returned the vow and added that she would become a woven laurel wreath for her knight. Anyway, judging by Ornella's expression, her earlier words had slapped her right back. Reality, heartbreak, and a bruised ego all at once. When it came time to exchange rings, Cesare slid one onto Aileen's finger that left her completely stunned. It was the exact ring she had once drawn as a child. Smiling softly, he told her to think of the ring as him, because as long as she wore it, he would remain by her side forever. And for her, that promise was more than enough. After the ceremony, she sat in the room in a daze, staring at the ring on her finger, as if it might suddenly explain itself if she looked long enough. But no matter how many times she looked at it, the answer did not change. It was that ring. The design, the shape, even the tiny details were identical. At this point, coincidence had officially left the room. How on earth did Cesare see her diary? And when? The only time she could remember him visiting recently was, well, that one day. And aside from the kissing moment she refused to dwell on, there had been no chance he could have snooped through her things. Her gaze drifted to the bed nearby, and without thinking, she wondered out loud whether they were really going to do it. Unfortunately for her nerves, her husband was already standing behind her. He casually asked what exactly she meant by do it, and Aileen reacted like her soul almost left her body. She instantly hugged herself and scrambled away, admitting that he arrived earlier than she expected. She had assumed he would still be busy celebrating with the guests. Cesare, clearly enjoying himself, pointed out that covering herself like that was not doing much. Before she could respond, he lifted her up without effort. When he told her to look at him, she shyly did so, and admitted she felt like she had not greeted him properly. He placed her gently on the bed and smiled, simply saying that he was back. He leaned in as if to kiss her, only to be stopped by her sudden sneeze. The timing was so perfect, it almost felt planned. When he asked if she was cold, she admitted it was a little. She explained that touching his clothes did it, the decorations and buttons and all that cold metal. Her body just reacted on its own. That explanation gave Cesare an idea. He started unbuttoning his shirt, joking that this was the first time someone had asked him to take it off so politely. Since his wife demanded it, he had no choice but to comply. He proceeded to show off his chest and abs like he was auditioning for modeling, even encouraging her to touch it. Aileen immediately buried her face in her hands, cheeks burning. Still, curiosity won the smallest battle. When she peeked, even she had to admit she had no idea a man could look like that beautiful. Instead of the obvious choice, her hand moved toward the large scar on his body. As she touched it carefully, her expression changed. She said it must have hurt a lot. The playful mood slowed as a wave of emotion washed over her. Aileen apologized. She knew he had scars from being a soldier, but she had not realized there were so many. She asked if there were more, and insisted on checking them too, already thinking about what medicine might help. She was so focused on her medical inspection that she did not notice when Cesare guided her hand somewhere very hard, ahem, and distracting. Her brain completely stalled. It was huge, like a stallion, and even she couldn't comprehend how that was possible for a normal human being. He tried to play it down, saying it was normal, though her husband was a little special. Of course, only she would soon find out for herself. The two ended up sharing a deep kiss, and when he nipped at her neck, she startled. When he asked if it hurt, she said it was only a little, and that she was just surprised. He seemed relieved by that answer, though the reason stayed locked away in his thoughts. Another memory rose. The day he discovered Aileen's death in his past life. Before his brother, the Emperor, Cesare had demanded answers. Why Leon did nothing. Why he had stood by while Aileen was driven to her end. Leon had bowed his head, explaining that Aileen chose that path herself to protect Cesare's honor. The anti-imperial nobles planned to use her research against the imperial family, and she stepped in first. The Grand Duke did not raise his voice. Instead, he calmly asked Leon why he thought he had been made him the emperor. Those words alone made Leon shake. He apologized again and again, saying he wanted to protect Aileen but lacked the power. When he tried to remove the crown, Cesare stopped him, pressing it back into place. He told his brother to keep wearing it. They would both pay their prices. As Cesare walked away, one truth stayed with him. The dead do not return. That was the rule of the world. So if Aileen could not come back to him, then he would go back to her, no matter the cost. And now, looking at his beautiful wife in front of him, Cesare knew one thing for sure. Everything he had done, every step he took, led to this moment. All of it was for her. The next morning, Aileen woke up to a gentle voice beside her, asking if she slept well and casually calling her his wife. One look at Cesare's handsome face was enough to make her panic internally. She immediately hid under the blanket, mumbled a shy good morning, and awkwardly asked if he slept comfortably too. That only amused him more. He teased her for not even looking at him properly, and then pointed out that there was no way she slept well at all. After all, his wife had fallen asleep first, and left him wide awake. It turned out she had completely passed out the night before, which explained a lot. He joked that next time she would have to stay with him until the very end. That made her pause, and wonder aloud if twice was not already the end. Cesare answered by kissing her forehead, and casually saying that twice was actually on the low side, which sent her brain straight into shutdown mode. Later that day, life returned to something closer to normal. The butler informed Aileen that the Grand Duke would briefly meet a guest in his office before heading out for personal business. He also mentioned that Michelle would be visiting soon, so all Aileen had to do was relax and enjoy her free time. He addressed her as Madam with perfect manners and left her alone with her thoughts. With nothing urgent to do, Aileen picked up the newspaper and immediately found the article about their wedding. The headline proudly described the union of the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess of Erzé, and compared the ceremony to the empire's founding myth brought to life. The article went on about her beauty and how she had captured the attention of every guest. By the time she finished reading, her face was warm with embarrassment. Still, she was finally married to Cesare. More than that, she reminded herself of her goal. She would continue her research and become a Grand Duchess no one could look down on. She refused to ever become a burden to him. The newspaper then moved on to another topic, highlighting a nobleman named Count Domenico. He had been announced as the new Speaker of the Senate, a man expected to bring change to Parliament. People speculated whether he could truly balance the interests of the imperial family with those of the nobles. At that very moment, the same man was standing in front of Cesare, demanding answers. He questioned since when the Grand Duke cared so much about politics, and accused him of hiding an agenda behind the reports he had sent. Cesare calmly asked if the Count had even read everything. That question alone explained why the man was there. The Count grew agitated, criticizing how the Grand Duke handled the previous chairman's son-in-law. He claimed the punishment was far too harsh, and complained that mediation between nobles and the imperial family was already difficult enough. In frustration, he even asked why Cesare did not simply wipe out all the nobles if that was his goal. That finally caught Cesare's attention. He smiled and replied that even if he did that, he still would not get what he wanted. The Count felt a chill run through him. Cesare then laughed lightly, brushing it off as a joke, and signaled Rotan to hand the Count a document. The moment the Count read it, his expression collapsed. Cesare explained that while he was away at war, records showed the Count had secretly cooperated with the Calpen kingdom. The reason was his wife's illness. Desperate to save her, he had been pulled into something he never truly believed in. The Count dropped to his knees and admitted everything. He had quit immediately once he realized what was being asked of him. Back then, he had even received an order to frame Aileen and push her toward a death sentence. He could not bring himself to do it. Cesare stepped closer and reminded him that he had almost harmed the Grand Duchess. As her husband, Cesare asked why the Count thought he was still alive. The Count guessed it was because he needed his cooperation. Cesare smiled. He explained that his wife would soon release a new medicine, one he held very high expectations for. There was only one small problem, though nothing serious compared to the impact of her work. Placing a hand on the Count's shoulder, Cesare made his offer. As the new Senate Speaker, the Count would protect the Grand Duchess and stand firmly on their side, like a loyal dog. The message was clear. From that day on, Count Domenico belonged to the Grand Duke's household, whether he liked it or not. Afterwards, the Grand Duke gave the green light to reopen Aileen's lab. Michelle explained that the new facility would be inside the Grand Duchy this time, which sounded impressive. The servants would handle most of the heavy equipment, but Aileen was gently reminded to pack the most important tools herself. That reminder was exactly why the two of them were standing in her old lab again. Aileen admitted it felt a little sad knowing she could not use this place anymore, but the excitement won out fast. She was genuinely happy that she could finally return to her research. When asked if it really made her that excited, Aileen answered without hesitation. She had many projects waiting, and for her, that kind of work was always rewarding. That was when the Count arrived and froze on the spot. Seeing the Grand Duchess inside a lab left him completely speechless. Months ago, he had come to this very place seeking help for his wife, who had been ill for years. Back then, he explained that their marriage had started as a political arrangement, but over time, he could no longer imagine life without her. He handed over the medicine his wife had been taking and admitted it no longer worked. In fact, her condition was getting worse. That desperation was what had led him to seek help from a back-alley apothecary at the time. Aileen examined the medicine and immediately recognized it as a strong painkiller. A patient needing that level of dosage meant both the patient and the caregiver had been suffering for a long time. She did not sugarcoat things. She told him she could not promise a full recovery, but she would do everything she could to ease his wife's pain. That was enough for him. He thanked her with tears, relieved that someone had finally helped him. Now, standing before the Grand Duchess, the Count failed to recognize her at all. He politely asked if she was also there to receive medicine or see the apothecary. Inside, Aileen felt a surge of panic. This man was the new Senate Speaker, and the idea of him realizing the Grand Duchess had once sold medicine in a shabby alley made her anxious, especially for her husband's sake. She hesitated, torn between fear and honesty. When the Count mentioned that he had been worried because the apothecary had suddenly disappeared and his wife's medicine supply was running low, Aileen finally spoke up. She assured him they had more than enough medicine prepared. Then, shyly, she introduced herself as the very person he had been looking for. The confusion on his face lingered until she put on her familiar thick glasses. The realization hit instantly. She asked if he had come to collect medicine, ready to prepare it right away. The Count quickly assured them that he had not come for that. He had come only to give thanks. The weight of his past misdeeds finally hit him, and he bowed deeply. That he had nearly caused harm to the very woman he considered his savior left him visibly shaken. Seeing Aileen nervously fumble with formalities, Michelle gently reminded her not to bend her knee so carelessly. While the two quietly sorted out etiquette, the Count remained lost in thought. The irony was not lost on him. He had almost committed something unforgivable against the very person who had given his wife peace. Now, ordered by the Grand Duke, he had a chance to repay that debt by serving the Grand Duchess faithfully. With a strange smile, the Count knelt and openly declared that being the Grand Duchess's loyal dog did not sound so bad. In fact, he thought it might even be enjoyable. Aileen tried to refuse, flustered, but Cesare appeared out of nowhere and casually asked if she preferred a puppy instead of an old dog. His timing was, as usual, terrible and perfect at the same time. He then walked past the still kneeling Count and, with a sweet voice, called Aileen his wife, asking if she had been waiting for her husband. Cesare made it very clear that he had no problem being openly affectionate with his wife, even with an audience. Once the Count leaves, the room grows quieter, and Aileen shyly admits she heard he had been extremely busy that day. She thought she would only get a quick glimpse of Cesare's face right before bedtime. So seeing him actually show up in person, all the way here, Feels like a surprise bonus scene she didn't expect. Cesare simply smiles like it's no big deal. Then, very casually, he picks up the red poppy flower. With that relaxed look on his face, he tells her to keep working on Morpheus. He promises to provide everything she needs for the research: funding, materials, support, whatever it takes. He even adds that getting Zenon involved might help as well. Now, Aileen would love to jump right back into her work. But the problem is, the stakes are terrifyingly high. Her research deals with narcotics, and if something goes wrong, the consequences won't just be a failed experiment. It could mean execution. And to make things even trickier, she's no longer just the apothecary from the back alley. She's the Grand Duchess now. If people discover she's been experimenting with dangerous substances, the scandal alone could stain her husband's name. And that thought weighs heavily on her. Noticing the worry written all over her face, Cesare reassures her that no one can send her to the guillotine. Not while he's around. And if she's concerned about protecting his honor, then the best thing she can do is succeed and make her research truly worth it. That simple promise hits Aileen right in the heart. Her eyes begin to tear up with relief as she thanks him. With renewed confidence, she proudly declares that she will definitely make Morpheus a success. Not just another painkiller, but something better than anything that already exists. And once Aileen enters research mode, well, there's no turning it off. She starts flooding Cesare with information about her progress: ingredients, results, theories, future plans. It's like opening a fire hydrant of medical facts. But halfway through, Aileen suddenly stops. It hits her that she accepted his help way too easily again. Cesare keeps giving, and she hasn't really done anything to repay him yet. That thought bothers her, so she starts thinking hard about what she can do for him. Then it clicks. She recalled the wound in his palm, the one he had gotten while rescuing her from the kidnapping. Immediately, she pulls out a medicine from her drawer and asks him to show his palm for a moment. Cesare, a little confused, simply raises his gloved hand. Aileen quickly corrects herself, saying she wants to see his actual palm, which means he needs to take off the gloves. Now, for a normal person, removing gloves would be a completely boring task. But this is Cesare we're talking about. The man slowly pulls off his glove while lightly biting the fabric, looking way too hot for something so simple. And with a teasing smile, he says that his sweet wife keeps telling him to take things off. But he only takes things off in front of her. And just like that, her face turns bright red as she realizes what that sentence sounded like. She quickly stammers that she only meant the glove, and that if anyone overheard him saying that, people would definitely get the wrong idea. Anyway, back to the original mission, checking the injury. Aileen carefully takes his hand and studies his palm. She's worried the sword wound might have left a scar, since those kinds of injuries tend to heal badly even after a long time. Luckily, she already developed a special scar cream that works really well, and she's confident it could help him. But as she examines both of his hands closely, instead of focusing on treating the wound, she begins to feel a growing sense of confusion. Because there's nothing there. No trace that an injury ever existed, as if the wound had never happened at all. That strange discovery reminds her of something else. Her wedding ring perfectly matches the one drawn in her diary. The realization only adds to the growing list of things about him that don't quite make sense. Finally gathering her courage, Aileen asks him directly how he knew about it. Instead of answering right away, Cesare calmly asks her if she isn't curious about the wound on his hand. Of course she is. Anyone would be curious at that point. Aileen admits that she can't explain it well, but her instincts tell her the two things might be connected somehow. Then Cesare casually says he read her diary. He even adds that it was very cute. Aileen immediately calls that out as suspicious. The timing simply doesn't work. When he came to her house and arranged the wedding so quickly, there shouldn't have been any time for him to read it. For a moment, Cesare lowers his head. Then he quietly says that the wound on his hand was simply the price he paid. Just like how she paid the price of becoming the Grand Duchess in order to avoid execution. That answer only creates more questions. So, Aileen asks him to explain it properly. But this time, Cesare gently refuses. He says he will explain it someday, just not right now. And hearing that makes Aileen realize something painful. Even now, even after becoming his wife, Cesare still keeps a wall between them. There are things he refuses to tell her, just like before. Before she can process that feeling completely, Cesare suddenly steps closer. He gently touches her lips with his finger, and softly says that if the day ever comes when he has to make her cry, he wants to delay that moment for as long as possible. Then the two of them share a deep, lingering kiss. And while she holds on to him in that quiet moment, she understands something deep inside her heart. Cesare will probably always be this way. Mysterious, protective, carrying burdens he refuses to share. Even as his wife, she may not be able to help him the way she wants to. And that sharp realization quietly aches inside her chest. The story then takes a step back to explain something important about the empire itself. There was once a legend about the man who started it all, the founding emperor of Trajan. According to the old story, the emperor wasn't born into glory. In fact, he began life as an abandoned prince. Growing up in the harsh wilderness, he developed a will that refused to break. With no throne waiting for him, he made a decision early on. If the world refused to give him a kingdom, then he would simply build one himself. It seems the gods admired that determination. As a sign of their blessing, they sent him a winged lion. That majestic creature later became the symbol of the Trajan Empire, representing both power and divine favor. And the emperor didn't waste that blessing. The young ruler conquered land after land, building his empire piece by piece through sheer force of will. But even someone unstoppable eventually meets something that changes everything. One day, the emperor fell deeply in love with a woman. For the first time, the conqueror who had taken the entire continent wanted something simple. He wanted her by his side as empress. Naturally, he decided to marry her immediately. However, before the wedding could take place, an oracle delivered a warning. If the emperor truly wished to make that woman his empress, he had to wait 7 long years. After conquering the continent without hesitation, waiting 7 years for love felt impossible. So the young ruler ignored the prophecy and held a grand wedding right away. But the joy didn't last long. On their first night together, the empress suddenly collapsed in the emperor's arms. She coughed up blood and eventually died. Heartbroken and desperate, the emperor cried out to the gods. He declared that he would sacrifice the divine gift they had given him. Even the blessing of the winged lion meant nothing if it couldn't bring his wife back. All he wanted was her return. And in his grief, he made a terrifying vow. If the gods refused to answer his prayer, he would drive every human they loved toward destruction. It was the kind of promise only a broken man could make. Then came the 7th night. That was when the gods finally answered him. They offered him a condition. If the emperor could endure 7 trials, his empress would return from death. But those trials would stretch across 7 long years. And so, the emperor accepted it. The legend says he faced every trial without turning back. By the end of it all, he succeeded. Just as the gods had promised, the empress returned to life, and the two were finally reunited. The story claims they lived happily ever after, becoming the foundation of the empire that exists today. After finishing the explanation, Sonia looks at Aileen. She nods slightly and mentions that she actually remembers reading that story in a book when she was younger. The legend became so important to the empire that it even shaped one of their marriage traditions. Because of that myth, a wife officially takes her husband's family name 7 days after the wedding, which means that in just a few days, she will enter the imperial palace to formally receive the Erzet name. But instead of feeling excited about it, her thoughts drifts back to Cesare. More specifically, to the fact that he still keeps many things hidden from her. Even now, she feels like she hasn't done anything in return for everything he has given her. That uncomfortable feeling stays with her. So she turns to Sonio and asks him directly if there is truly nothing she should be doing as the Grand Duchess. Sonio explains that technically she could manage the basic matters of the estate. However, while speaking, he notices the troubled look on her face and stops. Aileen admits that she wants to be useful as the Grand Duchess. Sitting around doing nothing doesn't feel right to her. At the very least, she wants to help her husband somehow. Sonio coughs lightly, realizing he may have overlooked her feelings. He admits that he was short-sighted and hadn't realized she felt that way. Then he remembers something important. Earlier, he had been reviewing several important letters addressed to Aileen. He asks if she would like to look at them first. He also mentions that a private office has already been prepared for her. If she wishes, They can bring the letters there. The moment Aileen hears that, her expression brightens immediately. She quickly agrees, ready to get started right away. Not long after, Aileen is seated in that office. One particular letter catches her attention, and she carefully considers how she should respond. The message politely congratulates her on her recent marriage and mentions a tea party she plans to host soon, suggesting it would be the perfect opportunity for Aileen's first social appearance as the Grand Duchess. And the sender? None other than Ornella. She glances towards Sonyo and asks what he thinks about it. But the old man replies that the most important opinion is that of the Grand Duchess herself. Aileen already understands how powerful the Parvalini dukedom is within the empire. Still, she wonders whether her very first social gathering as Grand Duchess should really be decided by Ornella. For someone in her position now, simply following someone else's lead feels questionable. After thinking it over, she decides not to just accept the invitation as it is. Instead, she suggests a different plan to Sonyo. Later that same day, the reply reaches Ornella. The moment she reads it, she bursts into laughter. Aileen had politely declined the invitation. Instead, she invited Ornella to attend a tea party that Aileen herself would host. With a mocking tone, Ornella remarks that Aileen has suddenly become bold just because she got married. Her father, the Duke, listens while glancing at her. With mild amusement, he comments that the Grand Duchess sounds as if she is summoning her subordinates. Rather than being offended, he seems impressed. It appears Aileen knows how to keep Ornella from taking control of the situation. Ornella, however, is far from pleased. Smiling coldly, she reminds her father that she told him many times that she should have been the one to marry the Grand Duke. Now she complains about how arrogant Aileen has become, calling her nothing more than an insignificant girl. The Duke doesn't seem to understand why his daughter is so upset about it. He tries to calm her down, explaining that in time she will monopolize the attention of the entire empire. But that answer only makes Ornella more irritated. She questions why her father, always proud of her, would be content with her merely receiving attention and being the noblest woman in the empire. People will eventually stop caring about her, she thinks. Even if she becomes empress, the Grand Duke and his wife already have all the admiration. The Duke reassures his daughter that such a thing will never happen. So, she only needs to keep doing what she always does. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he burns Aileen's letter in his hand. As the paper turns to ash, he declares with a terrifying smile that he will take care of the cleanup. On the day she officially became the Grand Duchess, the palace was far more crowded than Aileen had anticipated. Even Diego insisted he wouldn't miss such a special occasion. Moments like this were rare, and he clearly planned to savor every second. But old habits die hard, and she still instinctively lowered her head whenever too many eyes were on her. Still, she did her best to stand tall and get used to the attention. After all, this was her new life now. The atmosphere suddenly shifted when two very familiar figures entered the venue. Ornella and her father had arrived. Both of them walked in with wide smiles, as if they had been waiting for this moment all week. Ornella greeted Aileen warmly and introduced the man beside her as her father. She even joked that her father insisted on coming because he worried too much about her, even though she had told him she could attend the palace by herself. The Duke laughed lightly and said that when someone has a precious daughter like Ornella, worrying simply comes with a job. He then bowed politely and formally introduced himself. Aileen returned the greeting with a polite smile, keeping everything calm and respectful. Watching the warm bond between Ornella and her father stirred something in Aileen's mind. Her own father had never shown her that kind of care. It was only a small difference, but it was enough to sting. Unfortunately, Ornella noticed. And like someone spotting an open door, she walked straight through it. With a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, Ornella casually asked why the Baron hadn't come to accompany his daughter today. Then she added that on such a joyful occasion, it must be painful for Aileen that her only family member didn't attend. The words floated through the air like a disguised jab. Even Diego looked ready to snap back on Aileen's behalf. But before anyone else could react, Aileen answered firmly. She said she wasn't heartbroken at all, because today another family member was accompanying her. And almost as if the timing had been rehearsed, the doting husband appeared right then. He reached her side and gently asked whether they should have simply left their estate together earlier. Aileen shook her head and told him it was fine. She knew he had been busy, but she was grateful that he came to see her anyway. Cesare responded by leaning down and placing a soft kiss on her head. He didn't even bother pretending to care that a crowd of nobles was watching. The moment looked like a perfect picture of a loving couple, but that peaceful image lasted only about 3 seconds before the Duke awkwardly cleared his throat. He congratulated the couple on their marriage and admitted that he never expected the Grand Duke to have such a warm side. Cesare smiled and said that people often claimed a man blinded by love would even betray his own country. With so many rumors circulating about his supposed madness, it seemed the Duke was simply a bit late catching up. The Duke immediately questioned how Cesare could say something like that so casually. The Grand Duke didn't bother arguing. Instead, he simply turned away with Aileen and began walking off with her at his side. As they moved, he calmly said that it was the truth, so the Duke shouldn't worry about it. Either way, he gladly accepted the congratulations. Then his tone turned noticeably colder. He added that moving forward, he trusted the Duke would simply continue blessing their future. The message was polite, but the warning underneath it was impossible to miss. Shortly after that tense exchange, Aileen signed the marriage contract that officially made her the Grand Duchess. She stared at it for a moment, almost to make sure it was real. The sight of it filled her with a quiet, profound happiness. To celebrate the occasion, the Emperor suggested that Cesare play the piano for his wife. Soon the room filled with soft music as the Grand Duke sat at the piano and began to play. Aileen and Leon watched him quietly. Leon remarked that his younger brother had always been like that. Since childhood, there hadn't been a single thing Cesare couldn't do. He was naturally talented at everything. Leon confessed that he had once been jealous, but he eventually realized it made no sense. A normal human like him could never compete with someone like Cesare. Trying to would be like challenging a god. As he spoke, there was something strange in his expression, a hint of something deeper behind his smile, one that reminded Aileen of someone. Even after they left the palace, Aileen couldn't shake the strange feeling lingering at the back of her mind. But eventually she mentioned that the Emperor seemed extremely proud of Cesare. The Grand Duke, however, didn't make a big deal out of it. He simply replied that his brother had always been like that. But Aileen kept thinking about it. Her mother used to say something similar when she was younger. She often spoke about Cesare as if he were more than just a talented man. According to her mother, he was like a god among people, and one day Aileen would also realize just how great he truly was. And the look her mother used to have, it was the same look the Emperor showed earlier. It wasn't just pride. It felt like admiration taken to the extreme, as if they weren't merely praising Cesare, but worshipping him. Not as a brother or a loyal subject, something more than that. Before Aileen could sink deeper into that thought, Cesare suddenly asked what she was thinking about. Instead of sharing the strange realization she just had, Aileen quickly changed the subject. She said she was actually thinking about the piano performance earlier. His playing had been beautiful, and she thought it would be perfect background music while she worked on her research. The answer seemed to satisfy him, so he let the moment pass without asking anything further. Not long after, the couple made a small trip to Aileen's old home, and she thanked Cesare for bringing her there. He teased her, saying his wife seemed to be finding more and more reasons to thank him lately. While they were talking, Aileen suddenly remembered something and wondered out loud why her father had suddenly gone to the ranch. She had heard the news earlier from Michelle and had been surprised by it. Curious, she asked if Cesare might have been the one who sent the Baron there. Instead of answering directly, Cesare wrapped his arms around her from behind. Then he explained that one thing was certain. The Baron had apparently become quite close with the cows. Aileen, being completely naive, took the statement literally. She even pictured her father peacefully living among farm animals, like some kind of unexpected countryside retirement story. When Cesare asked if she wanted him to bring the Baron back from the ranch, Aileen shook her head. She said that if her father had truly become friends with the cows, maybe it would be good for him to stay there for a while. After all, being around the ranch might even help him quit his bad habits like drinking and gambling. From her POV, it sounded like a healthy lifestyle change. Soon after, the Grand Duke suggested that they head inside for dinner, just the two of them. Of course, Whenever Cesare said dinner, it usually meant he would be the one doing the meal prep while Aileen watched nearby. He even joked that making a wife dressed so elegantly prepare food would make him look like a terrible husband. Hearing that, Aileen turned around and said she would quickly go upstairs to change before coming back down. But before she could take more than a few steps, Cesare wrapped an arm around her waist and gently pulled her back. Leaning close, he whispered that the dress she was wearing looked uncomfortable in many ways. Without waiting for permission, he started loosening the strings of her corset, casually mentioning that as her husband, helping her should be perfectly normal. Aileen tried to protest, insisting she could handle it herself. But Cesare ignored the protest completely. Instead, he continued loosening the tight strings and leaned down, placing soft kisses along the back of her neck, while quietly calling her name again and again. When he finally stopped, his voice softened as he said that once, he had a dream. At the time, it felt so wonderful that he didn't want to wake up. Even though he knew it was only a dream, he wanted to stay there forever with her. Gently, he turned Aileen's head so he could see her face. Looking at her now, he said that nothing seemed to compare to reality. And with that, the two leaned closer and sealed the moment with a deep, passionate kiss. Their sweet moments eventually carried the couple all the way to their room. Just looking at her husband, Aileen felt an urge to move closer to him even faster. The shy girl who once panicked over the smallest things now wanted to stay in Cesare's arms for as long as possible. She didn't even realize when she had become this bold. Yet the moment Cesare touched her, all her confidence disappeared. Her face turned bright red. Anyone would blush after being caught so eager for their husband's touch. Every time their warmth met, a strange wave of happiness rushed through her. Wherever Cesare touched, a soft tingling spread through her body so strongly it made her head spin. It was the kind of feeling that made her forget everything else. Eventually, she couldn't hold back what she had been keeping inside, and softly confessed how much she truly loved him. And just like that, Aileen realized she had given him everything. Not just her trust, but even the parts of her heart she had locked away for a very long time. Cesare, however, couldn't resist teasing her. He joked that she only said those sweet things when they were holding each other like this. From now on, he promised, he would try even harder to keep her satisfied. And so, the couple held each other close, their bodies pressed together as they shared a passionate moment. Words weren't necessary. Each gentle motion spoke volumes of their love and desire. After some time, Aileen found herself gazing at her husband as he slept beside her. The sight reminded her of something Sonyo had once mentioned. The Grand Duke had struggled to sleep properly for a long time, and restful nights had become rare ever since he returned from the war. Gently, she reached out and stroked his hair, hoping he could finally enjoy a peaceful rest. Not just tonight, but for many nights to come, always by her side. Then, Cesare suddenly opened his eyes. Aileen blinked in surprise and asked if she had woken him. If he was having trouble sleeping again, she suggested that perhaps some tea could help him relax. Instead of answering, her husband softly called her name again and again. His hand slowly reached up to touch her face. Thunder rumbled and lightning split the sky, and in the next moment, everything changed. Cesare suddenly pushed her onto the bed, pinning her beneath him. At first, confusion filled her expression, but it quickly turned into fear. His hands tightened around her neck, and she couldn't understand why this was happening. And yet, even as his grip tightened, he whispered gently that it wouldn't hurt much, that it would be over soon. Tears slowly formed in her eyes as the situation grew more and more terrifying. His words didn't match his actions. Over and over he said he loved her, but the way he was treating her felt like the complete opposite of love. The contradiction was so painful that the entire moment began to feel unreal. For a brief second, it almost seemed as if Aileen had fallen into a terrible nightmare, barely able to breathe. Because if this was reality, only one question remained. Why would Cesare, her husband, the man she trusted the most, do something like this?